Welcome to Anti-Crusade, Part 2 of 4. As I promised, I told you I'd reveal the names of certain people in a certain continuity of history. Lord, I'm going to try my best to pronounce this British noble's name, Lord Shaftesbury, I believe his name was the first to say, a land without a people for a people without a land. A land for a people without a land was not even a Jewish concept. It was a Christian Zionist, a restorationist concept, as in Christian Zionist. It was not a Jewish idea. It would then later be hijacked by Israel Zangwill, I believe I'm saying his name correctly, a Jewish supremacist. By the way, remember, Jewish supremacy is not the same as Zionism. Jewish supremacy, otherwise known as Jewish territorialism, was a failed movement. But Israel Zangwill would then later hijack the term a land without a people for a people without a land, and then the Zionists would hijack it from him. I said that I would let you know, and I did research this in heavy detail. Some of this is already known by Dr. Weizfeld, if not all of it. But I'm now going to start this with something very special, bringing you to the rabbis who actually have the Mizorah, the leaders of our generation, the Chariot. Rabbi David Feldman speaks here. On November 19th, 2023, Rabbi David Feldman, addressing Muslim congregants on the situation in the Gaza Strip after the noon prayer at the Quebec Islamic Center in Quebec City, Canada. English and French. I do hope that you find this enlightening. After this, I will have more to say.
Avec nous, on a le rabbi David Feldman. Il est responsable d'une organisation internationale installée à Jérusalem. Ça s'appelle Naituri Karta International, donc NKI. Donc lui est venu de New York pour en fait supporter la cause palestinienne. Donc il était avec nous dans un congrès très important avec d'autres juifs pour donner son opinion de la situation du conflit à Gaza et en Palestine en général. Donc il est tout le temps contre le zionisme, contre l'État d'Israël, contre toute atrocité, tout type d'atrocité qui arrive en Israël. Donc il veut démontrer maintenant sa solidarité envers les Palestiniens et la Palestine. Il va démontrer sa solidarité avec vous. Donc, et il va vous adresser avec un petit mot. Donc bienvenue, welcome the Rabbi Feldman. Donc welcome very much. So thank you so much. So I will try to. Je vais essayer de traduire parce qu'il parle anglais. Je vais essayer de traduire phrase par phrase l'anglais qui va ou son mot. Donc.
Merci. Assalamu alaikum. As Brother Ahmad introduced, my name is Rabbi David Feldman from Neturei Karta International, Jews United Against Zionism.
So he is from Neturei Karta International, il est de Neturei Karta International de Jérusalem.
We represent masses of Jewish people worldwide in the opposition of Zionism, the State of Israel.
Il représente les congrégations des Juifs autour du monde qui sont contre le zionisme.
Masses of Jewish people worldwide are troubled and pained by the genocide we are seeing now, where so many innocent men, women and children are being mass murdered.
Les groupes des Juifs autour du monde sont vraiment touchés par le génocide qui arrive ou qui a lieu maintenant en Palestine.
It is not only the last couple of weeks, it is already over 75 years where this brutal occupation is unfortunately going on.
C'est pas seulement dans les dernières 4 semaines que ce génocide a lieu, mais c'est depuis 75 ans que ce génocide a commencé.
Human beings throughout the world are speaking up and condemning all what is taking place.
Les êtres humains, tout l'homme autour du monde, toutes les personnes autour du monde sont contre le génocide qui arrive en Palestine.
We as Jewish people, representing masses of Jewish people, are so embarrassed when all of this is being done supposedly in our name.
Les Juifs autour du monde, incluant eux, sont embarrassés en fait par ce qui arrive en Palestine par la main des Juifs, d'autres Juifs.
It is disturbing and sad that our religion, the Jewish religion, unfortunately is being misused to justify all these crimes.
C'est très mauvais que la religion du judaïsme est exploitée, est utilisée pour justifier toute atrocité qui arrive en Palestine.
People unfortunately think that it's because we have a difference of religion, Jews and Muslims, that this, God forbid, is a cause for conflict.
Les gens pensent... Est-ce que vous pouvez répéter s'il vous plaît? Can you please repeat?
People think that the difference of religion is the cause to conflict.
Ok, donc les gens autour du monde pensent que c'est à cause de la différence entre l'islam et le judaïsme qui crée ce conflit-là.
We as Jews and Muslims, we have to together remember the history of our peoples.
Oui, nous, étant comme des juifs et des musulmans, on doit retourner à notre histoire à notre histoire partagée entre les musulmans et les juifs.
We as Jewish people, minority Jews, lived in many Muslim countries in peace and security.
Nous, comme des minorités juives, on a vécu dans des pays de majorité musulmane en paix.
We remember and appreciate the hospitality that the Muslim communities have extended to the Jews throughout history.
Nous se rappelons le bon accueil des musulmans dans les pays musulmans que eux ont présenté envers les juifs dans leur pays. On n'oublie pas ça.
We insist that this history not being forgotten.
Nous insistons que cette histoire-là ne sera jamais oubliée. L'histoire entre les musulmans et les juifs, le bon accueil, l'hospitalité entre les musulmans et les juifs.
Despite all what's happening, we have to overcome the propaganda.
Malgré tout ce qui se passe, il faut dépasser cette propagande.
We have to know what is the cause to what is taking place.
Il faut savoir c'est quoi les raisons, les causes qui sont à l'arrière de ce qui s'arrive en Palestine.
It is this unfortunate, sad, tragic occupation of Palestine.
C'est à cause de cette occupation malheureuse des Israéliens au territoire palestinien. C'est ça la cause.
This is causing so much death and destruction to the Palestinian people.
Ça cause beaucoup de morts et de destructions des peuples palestiniens.
And at the same time also causing hate and danger to the Jewish people.
Ça cause aussi de laïsme envers les Juifs et les communautés juives.
The movement of Zionism, the state of Israel, is not only a catastrophe for Palestine.
Le mouvement zioniste qui est à l'arrière de l'État d'Israël ne cause pas seulement des catastrophes en Palestine.
It is a catastrophe for the Jewish people as well.
C'est une catastrophe aussi pour le peuple juif aussi.
We as Jewish communities condemn all these atrocities taking place for so long.
Nous, étant comme des peuples juifs, nous condamnons les atrocités arrivant ou ayant lieu dans les territoires palestiniens.
And we hope for the future when this cause to peace, this cause to conflict, this occupation of Palestine will stop.
Nous espérons du moment de la paix où cette occupation des territoires palestiniens arrête.
And we hope that once this cause to conflict will stop, we can once again, as peoples, live together regardless of any differences.
On peut retourner dans le point où on peut coexister ensemble comme on était auparavant.
And we should remember that so many Jews refuse to be represented by the state of Israel.
Il faut savoir aussi que beaucoup des Juifs refusent d'être représentés par les zionistes ou d'Israël.
Unfortunately, it's the movement of Zionism which insists that they represent all.
C'est malheureusement le mouvement de zionisme qui insiste de représenter tous les Juifs.
But we all have to be smarter than all of this.
Mais nous devons être plus intelligent que ce mouvement zioniste.
We hope, we encourage people to do everything they can to alleviate or help the people of Palestine.
Oui, en nous encourageant les peuples de faire tout ce qu'ils peuvent pour réformer la situation en Palestine.
We should never be intimidated by any Zionist or pro-Zionist intimidation.
On ne doit pas être intimidé par les intimidations générées par les zionistes.
We should speak up for humanity, for Palestine and for the Jewish people.
On doit parler de la cause de l'humanité, la cause en fait d'être motivé de l'humanité. On doit être pour l'humanité malgré la résistance qu'on voit causée ou générée par les zionistes.
And we all should pray together for the end of this occupation. We hope that this happens peacefully with no more suffering of anyone.
Nous devrons invoquer à Dieu que cette occupation, ces moments malheureux se terminent sans encore avoir plus de dégâts ou plus d'accidents en Palestine.
And hopefully then we will be able to live in peace and harmony again.
Si ça arrive, on pourra un jour coexister en harmonie bientôt.
Merci. Assalamu alaikum.
Merci. Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, so right now we're going to go to the PBS NewsHour. This particular video came out on November 17th, 2023.
President Biden's response to the ongoing Israel-Hamas war has angered Muslim and Arab Americans. Those voters represent a key voting bloc for Democrats that helped Biden to win in the swing state of Michigan in 2020. Here's Laura Barone-Lopez with more.
Amna, the Biden administration has vowed unequivocal support to Israel and refuses to call for a ceasefire as more than a reported 11,000 Palestinians have been killed. Biden has repeatedly called for extended humanitarian pauses to aid civilians in Gaza and recover hostages. But Arab and Muslim voters say it's not enough.
My name is Suhaila Amen, and I live in Dearborn Heights, Michigan, and I work in education.
Alexis Zaydan, 31 years old. I was born and raised in Dearborn, Michigan, and I currently reside in Detroit, Michigan.
My name is Raisa Fatima, and I am a law student at the University of Michigan.
My name is Ali Abazid, and I'm the founding director of health and chief public health officer for the city of Dearborn. When you cast aside the numbers of Palestinians in Gaza being killed, when in response to a question around a ceasefire, which in my view is the most bare minimum request that can be made at this point, and the response being none, no possibility of a ceasefire from the President of the United States, we have no choice but to think about our reconsideration of our vote going into 2024.
A group of us have been phone banking at the University of Michigan Law School, and we've sent in hundreds of calls to our local representatives, our state senators, our U.S. House of Representatives, and we haven't received any callbacks.
They feel betrayed, they feel dehumanized, they feel demoralized by our administration right now. And what we're seeing and what we're witnessing is that, their loyalty to the Arab American community is dispensable to them.
For us in Dearborn, a lot of us come from backgrounds of war. My family is in southern Syria. They know war far too well. A lot of folks in Dearborn have lived through war in Lebanon, in Yemen. Palestinians themselves whose connection to Gaza and the West Bank is well documented. And so this community knows war all too well, knows the traumas of war.
I don't think our elected officials are doing enough to address the harm of the type of rhetoric they're using. And we're seeing very real consequences, even just within the United States. There was a 6-year-old boy who was killed in Chicago. There's been a rise in Islamophobia, but this hasn't been given equal weight or even nearly enough weight as it should be.
I don't feel that there is any way in walking back from this, rolling out a strategy to combat Islamophobia, a little too late, Mr. President.
There's these gestures towards ending Islamophobia. And on the other hand, there's conflation of Muslim activism with anti-Semitism and hate speech. The language being used by the White House and the Democratic Party really is rooted in Islamophobic comments. The censure of Rashida Tlaib, it's emblematic of the censorship of Muslim voices in America.
There has always been a push post 9/11 to have us sitting at the table so that our voices were heard, but yet we're seeing today, especially, that all of those conversations and all of the opportunities that we've had to have our voice heard has only fallen upon deaf ears. Why are we even bothering to have a seat at the table and bothering to share our voices when no one's actually listening to anything that we have to say, and then continue, to misinterpret, misconstrue, or misuse the words that we do share? And, it's putting us in a position where, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
The sad reality of what we're facing as voters in this country is that we are no longer voting for the lesser of two evils. In November, we will remember.
Muslim and Arab leaders are warning the Democratic Party that if President Biden doesn't change his approach, he may lose their support in 2024. A recent NewsHour Marist poll found that 34% of Democrats disapprove of Biden's handling of the conflict, up from 19% of Democrats last month. Joining me now to discuss the political ramifications is Wael Al-Zayat, CEO of the Muslim advocacy group Engage. Wael, thanks so much for being here. What are you hearing from Muslim and Arab voters about President Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and especially as the death toll continues to rise in Gaza?
We're hearing deep frustration, anger, sadness, and a feeling of betrayal. The Muslim American community in 2020, according to the Engage Impact polling that we conducted following the elections, found that 85% of Muslim voters, those who actually cast a ballot, said that they voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Many of them organized, many of them contributed, certainly cast their votes in protection of our democracy and, quite frankly, to get rid of Donald Trump. And now they feel that betrayal, that having supported an administration that said that they value democracy and will confront authoritarianism, uphold human rights, is essentially giving a carte blanche to someone like Bibi Netanyahu to commit war crimes and which have produced incredible carnage and devastation. Beyond the 11,000 killed, the concerns are Gaza will become uninhabitable and burden not only the region but the international community for generations to come.
The administration, Biden himself, will say that they've tried to stress to Netanyahu to abide by the laws of war. But in a state like Michigan, in a population where there is a large population of Muslim voters, President Biden won that state by a margin of 154,000 votes. Do you think that the president could lose that state next year?
Absolutely. And in fact, we really assess, given the polling that we're seeing, showing the president behind in some of the swing states, including Michigan, that the elections will probably be closer to what we saw in 2016 when Donald Trump won that state by 11,000 votes. And according to the Engage data of voters who are registered and casting ballots, there are 205,000 registered Muslim American voters. It doesn't take a math genius to realize that they could absolutely have an impact.
Are Muslim and Arab voters going to vote for the Republican nominee, which at this point it looks like it will be former President Donald Trump? Will they stay home, or are they going to vote third party?
Well, look, I think we need to understand that Muslim American voters, like American voters of all backgrounds and ethnicities and religions, understand what's at stake next year. We have lived through 4 years of Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans. We've experienced the Muslim ban and really the outright bigotry and racism against Black, brown, disabled, LGBTQ, Arab, Muslims, immigrants, people of all backgrounds. So therefore, I think we are way ahead of the elections next year, where the community is today, according to our polling, only 5% are telling us they would vote for Joe Biden, which is way down from that 85% I mentioned. However, what we're focused on right now is getting that ceasefire, getting the humanitarian assistance in, and really it's up to the voters next year to make that decision.
I wanted to ask you about those stakes that you mentioned, because you mentioned Trump Trump's Muslim ban. He has said that he would extend that if he wins re-election in 2024. And he has specifically said that he would bar refugees in Gaza. So are the voters that you're talking to aware of that potential consequence if they vote third party or if they decide to stay home?
They absolutely are, which is really what's so frustrating about the situation we find is us. And as Americans, look, Joe Biden and the Democrats built a big tent party, right? And essentially, this policy is risking fracturing that coalition, not just for Muslim voters, but for young voters, for Black voters, for progressive voters, for people of decency who are just not okay with Israel bombing its way out of a problem that it is partly responsible for, which is the occupation and the siege of Gaza for the last 17 years. This is being forced upon us, and my fear is that this misguided policy, driven by, quite frankly, a neocon approach that takes us back to the ugly days of the war on terror, that is fracturing this coalition and could possibly hand this country and our future to the dark forces of MAGA Republicans. This is not on Muslim voters. This is on this administration.
Well, I have to ask because the president has said that he doesn't think a ceasefire is realistic because he thinks that Hamas has to be vanquished because of the fact that they said that they will continue to attack Israel. So because the president doesn't appear ready to support a ceasefire anytime soon, what exactly do Muslim and Arab voters that you talk to want to see from him? Is there something else that he could potentially do to win back their support?
He can call for a ceasefire, but also he can absolutely not give $14 billion to Bibi Netanyahu to spend as he please. We can condition the support. We can make sure that they are abiding by Leahy vetting, which ensures that U.S. weapons and money is not ending up harming or killing civilians. We can absolutely increase humanitarian delivery. Right now, only a few trucks are getting in, which includes the lifting of the siege on the civilian population.
Well, Al-Zayat of Engage, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
And now we're going to go to a clip from Democracy Now!, which came out on November 15th, 2023.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. This week has been dubbed the Jews for a Ceasefire Week of action by groups including If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace. In Chicago, hundreds of Jews and allies blocked the entrance to the Israeli consulate Monday.
Ceasefire means ending the genocide, the invasion, the siege. It means hostage release now. It means no more escalation to further war, violence, and death. And it means creating space for a true diplomatic solution that addresses the root causes of occupation and apartheid.
Around the country, Jews calling for a ceasefire also held sit-ins in the offices of Congress members. In Washington, D.C. Monday, dozens of rabbis with Rabbis for Ceasefire were joined by spiritual leaders and hundreds of others for morning prayer and reading of the Torah in front of the U.S. Capitol to call for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Freedom.
After the special Chariot service, rabbis and supporters marched to congressional offices where they met with elected officials. This is Congressmember Cori Bush.
We are rabbis, we are pastors, we are Congress members, we are surviving family members, we are human beings, and we are bound by our faith to demand a ceasefire now, to demand an end to the violence now, to demand that love and peace and justice and humanity reigns and is at the center of all of our work now, not tomorrow, not next week, not in a month, not in a year, now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now.
For more, we're joined by Rabbi Alyssa Wise, organizer with Rabbis for Ceasefire, former co-executive director of the organization Jewish Voice for Peace, where she was also the founding co-chair of JVP's Rabbinical Council. So we're seeing all of this opposition around the country. Can you describe what happened in Washington? We just saw Cori Bush, I think AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, a number of other Congress members who were there for your prayer service. Talk about the support you're getting.
We're getting tremendous support from the signers of the Ceasefire Now resolution. And on Monday, when we brought our message to D.C., we were buoyed by the embrace of these members of Congress. But actually, the embrace went both ways. It was clear that our presence there in D.C. was a balm for their souls. They are being run through the mud for their voice of humanity and their voice of justice. And likewise, we need support too. We are rabbis for ceasefire. We are, as rabbis, responsible to serve the Jewish people's spiritual, cultural, communal health. And as part of that, our obligation as rabbis is to ensure that Jewish people are part of the most profound and sacred obligation in Jewish tradition, which is saving lives. And that is the root of our call for ceasefire.
Rabbi, I'm wondering if you could talk about your experience and work within the Palestinian Solidarity Movement, and how do you counter claims that critique of Israeli policies and of the occupation is inherently anti-Semitic?
You know, there's been an effort over the past number of years to conflate critique of Israel with anti-Semitism. This is a deliberate strategy by those who seek to shield Israel from accountability. The truth is, Judaism is a beautiful, evolving religious civilization that has been part of the world for thousands of years. Zionism and the Jewish state has a far shorter history. Zionism is just over 125 years old, and the state just 75 years. There is nothing inherent in critiquing the Israeli state as anti-Semitic. The thing that we have to remember is that states must be held accountable when they violate human rights. And the cynical strategy by legacy Jewish institutions to shield Israel from accountability through claims that Israel is a Jew, or Israel is the Jew of the world. Israel is not a Jewish person. Israel is a state. God forbid we should not be able to cry out when states are committing horrific genocidal violence in the name of Jewish people. When American Jews around the world, rabbis and our congregants alike, are saying not in our name, they are enacting their obligation as Jewish people to protect life, to say every life is sacred, and to make no distinction between Israeli life and Palestinian life. As Representative Rashida Tlaib said, the cries of Israeli and Palestinian children don't sound different to her. They don't sound different to us. When you seek to stop critique of a nation state that is committing such horrific genocidal violence with claims of anti-Semitism, you are lending credence to that violence. You know, yesterday in D.C. at the pro-Israel rally, I was horrified to see that the most powerful anti-Semite in our country was given a headline spot. Shame on them. Shame on them for allowing Pastor John Hagee, who believes that Israel needs to be supported by Christian Zionists in order to hasten the second coming of the Messiah, at which point Jews must either convert en masse or burn. There is nothing more anti-Semitic than that. And shame on them for putting Jewish lives at risk, for playing Russian roulette with Jewish safety to protect Israel and to shield them from accountability for this horrific violence. When the crowd started shouting, "No ceasefire," I was humiliated. I was horrified. I was brought up in a tradition that teaches life is sacred. I prayed on Monday with my fellow rabbis in front of the Capitol that we are guided by an ahava rabbah, an unending love. And that unending love is not finite. It extends to all people, and it must. I think about my children, my Jewish children that I'm raising, and the peril that these Jewish organizations are putting them in when they cynically seek to conflate critique of Israel and anti-Semitism and create a stage for those who joyfully claim that Jews must convert or be burned at the coming of the second Messiah, and that is their reason why they support Israel. Shame on them.
Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.
This next clip should really end it for Americanism, but even though Americanism should be just as exposed as Zionism, this remains not the case, unfortunately. This is despite the fact that the only correct definition of Noahides would be people of, nations that follow the 7 laws of Noah, which, if we want to know who fits that description more than anything, it would be the Native Americans and First Nations people. By the way, a lot of Native Americans want to get rid of the word Native and just refer to themselves as Native. And there is a similar push of First Nations people to just also refer to themselves as Native. Of course, Native to what could be, a question into regard to who, but that is not their problem. But upon, and I've dealt with this a lot, upon explaining what the 7 laws of Noah are to most natives that hold their actual traditions and are not assimilated by Christianity, they tend to favor it, actually. You see, Chabad Lubavitch would have you believe that we have to create a Noahide religion for the Gentiles, when that's not the case. The Noahides already exist. Judaism, in fact, teaches that everybody should follow their own religion to, do the best of their ability. So this also means that, this common Maimonidean nonsense that, and again, I want to make this clear. I've tried to say this before, and maybe I haven't, but I need to say it now. There's nothing wrong with the study of Maimonides, the Rambam. But Maimonides, the Rambam, was not always correct. And he was not the first to codify the 613 mitzvot. That is a big misnomer. Most Sephardim who could counter that claim are dead, or willingly, working with the Zionists to erase such history. I know quite a bit about this. Unfortunately, those that I know who had taught me about these things, I'm no longer in contact with, or are so old that they would be dead by now. And I've had to face the decision. Does that mean I shut up about it because it's not written down? No, because if a bird falls in the forest, it still falls. Idealism is all that would say otherwise. So I don't care anymore. I'm going to put it this way. Current events that happen, I'm not going to report on unless I have it videotaped. To this day, I'm booted out of I'm booted out of a lot of political circles, not just the status quo. I'm booted out of a lot of political circles because of what happened on May 27, 2019. I begged Dr. Weizfeld to please don't let me, don't have me talk about something that I don't think I can prove. It happened, and I'm never going to say it didn't happen because it happened, those events, but he doesn't have to deal with the issue, and Donna Newman ran away like a coward. Her paperwork was never as screwed up as mine, but after that event it was screwed up, and I know why. It's because of the stuff Donna Newman's done in the past and who she's connected to. So there is clearly some part of the state that goes rogue on citizens in the state of Arizona. The state of Arizona is one of the #1 places for identity theft. The state of Arizona is one of the #1 places for auto theft, and it is the human trafficking capital of the United States, regardless of whatever statistics you hear. And that's largely because there is a big cover-up around the way the trafficking works. You have to assume that the most bourgeois of the bourgeoisie are involved in human trafficking, because when you own all the money in the world, you get bored. You don't have to put 2 and 2 together. It's just self-evident. I'm working really hard to speak more normative, whatever that means, in these videos. When I reply to the conservative rabbi, I'm from the way I've already done that part of the recording for this video, and I still go off the hinges, kind of like I did with the previous rabbi in the previous video. But for most of this video, I think I've done better. Hopefully, it will be said that Anti-Crusade Part 2 of 4 is better than Anti-Crusade Part 1 of 4. And hopefully, Anti-Crusade Part 3 of 4 will be better than this video. I hope. But this is just... It's just really screwed up what's going on here. Not many people understand just how in danger the Jewish Palestinians are. They are not as in danger as the non-Jewish Palestinians, obviously, but they are in danger. And not many people realize that Palestinian Americans might as well already be dead because America's out to get them. The only solution would be the abolishment of the United States of America. And, you know, this is a thing. As I take Orthodox Judaism seriously, I am compelled to reach out to Native Americans and let them know, you are the Noahides. Don't worry, you don't have to make any conversions. You already follow these 7 laws organically. And I think that that's a dangerous message to people. You'll notice Neturei Karta is very careful not to attack the countries they live in, unless, of course, it's the State of Israel, for understandable reasons. There's nothing false about Neturei Karta, but I would say that they suffer a similar ghettoization to that which Satmar suffers with, but not to the same level. Satmar kind of acts cowardly on a lot of levels, and I'm not attacking Satmar. I will defend Satmar. That is one of the reasons why I will be coming out with videos exploring and explaining why Unorthodox is an anti-Semitic 4-part film series, because it is. But I also have to concede that Dr. Weizfeld is correct about the show Big Bang. It's anti-Semitic. And because it's anti-Semitic, that same measure of logic makes the show Seinfeld anti-Semitic. People born of Jewish mothers, just because you're born of a Jewish mother doesn't mean you're free from Judophobic anti-Semitism. What makes someone Jewish is how much of the Torah culture they take up, or how much of the Sinai covenantal religion they take up. Both the Sinai covenantal religion and the Torah culture is what we would call Judaism. Judaism is a cultural religion. It is not a philosophical religion. Examples of philosophical religions would include Taoism, Confucianism. You know, those are philosophical religions. Cultural religions include not just Judaism, but Hinduism and Sikhism. And so some would ask, does that mean the Sikhs are a nation? And the answer is yes. Does this mean that the Hindus are a nation? The answer is yes. So what about India? Well, India is not a nation. India is a country with many ethnic groups and many religious groups. It is a country. So you have to separate country from state. I would say a country is defined as more than a territory. A country is defined as land with sovereignty in it. It's a grouping of people on land with sovereignty. And the state would be something more than that. A state is when people are enslaved by the sovereignty. Dr. Weizfeld doesn't hold the same view. To him, he doesn't distinguish between state and sovereignty. I think that that's dangerous. He thinks that my position is probably dangerous, and I might be being a little bit hyperbole here, and I'm sorry if I am. But these are conversations that should be explored. The Native Americans require their sovereignty back. What's required is not just simple territorial autonomy for them, but sovereignty. They are the sovereigns of this land. And I'll give another example. Wherever I go, nothing is more sovereign than the forest. The trees are sovereign. I am subject to them. We as humans must abolish humanism in favor of environmentalism because the forest is our sovereign worldwide. The forest is sovereign. The sea and the air are sovereign. These are sovereign. We should not pollute the sea or the air. And for those who think that they can make I don't make vegetarian arguments. I think vegetarianism is a choice. Some people think that you're like the worst person in the world if you're not vegetarian. But if the argument could ever be made that we must all be vegetarian, then that is also a sovereign argument. Now, this can be disputed. And the person that could dispute this probably very well would be Dr. Weizfeld, and I would consistently push back. We are not in a position to make those debates right now, unfortunately, although I think we would both enjoy those debates. And this gets into one of the things about what the Bundist movement represents. We need cordial reciprocity with each other. We need cordial debate with each other on these matters. And we're not discussing these matters because we're too afraid of what the Zionists are going to think. I say, fuck the Zionists. And fuck the bastard rabbi that I'm going to tear apart here soon in this video. Also a disclaimer, Neteria Karta would not approve of my foul language. And I do say that in respect and reverence to them. They would not approve of my foul language. I can promise you this. So this next clip is also from Democracy Now! It came out on November 28th, 2023.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. We begin today's show in Burlington, Vermont, where 3 Palestinian college students were shot on Saturday as they were walking to dinner at the home of one of the students' grandmothers who lives near the University of Vermont. 2 of the men were wearing keffiyehs, and they were speaking Arabic at the time of the attack. The young men have been identified as Hisham Aratani, a Brown University student, Kenan Abdelhamid of Haverford College, and Tassin Ahmad, a student at Trinity College. They were all 20 years old. They're all 20 years old and graduates of the Ramallah Friends School in the occupied West Bank. 2 of the students remain hospitalized. Hisham Aratani, who was shot in the spine, has reportedly lost feeling in the lower part of his body and may never walk again. Authorities have charged a 48-year-old white man named Jason Eaton with 3 counts of second-degree attempted murder. He's being held without bail. He pleaded not guilty on Monday. He reportedly shot the students from his porch as they walked by. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland said the FBI is investigating whether the shooting is a hate crime. The shooting comes just weeks after a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy was stabbed to death near Chicago by his landlord. Tamara Tamimi, the mother of one of the students, Kenan Abdelhamid, told ABC News, quote, "To us, it's decades of dehumanizing policy and rhetoric from U.S. leaders towards Palestinians and Arabs, including from the Biden administration, which has caused our children to be in the situation that they're in," unquote. On Monday, relatives of the men shot in Vermont joined local authorities at a news conference at Burlington City Hall. This is Rich Price, the uncle of the Brown student, Hisham Aratani.
We speak only on behalf of the family because the family can't be here. I want to say that these 3 young men are incredible. And that's not just proud uncle speaking, but it's true. They have their lives in front of them. I moved here 15 years ago, and I never imagined that this sort of thing could happen. And my sister lives in the occupied West Bank, and people often ask me, aren't you worried about your sister? Aren't you worried about your nephews and your niece? And the reality is, as difficult as their life is, they are surrounded by an incredible sense of community. And tragic irony is not even the right phrase, but to have them come stay with me for Thanksgiving and have something like this happen speaks to the level of civic vitriol, speaks to the level of hatred that exists in some corners of this country. It speaks to a sickness of gun violence that exists in this country.
That was Rich Price, the uncle of Hisham Aratani, one of the 3 college students of Palestinian descent who were shot Saturday in Burlington, Vermont. And this is Kenan Abdelhamid's uncle, Radi Tamimi.
Kenan grew up in the West Bank, and we always thought that that could be more of a risk in terms of his safety, and sending him here would be the right decision. And we feel somehow betrayed in that decision here, and we're just trying to come to terms with everything.
We're joined by 2 guests. In Burlington, Vermont, Wafiq Fawar is with us. He's a Palestinian refugee from Lebanon, has lived in Vermont for years. He's a member of Vermonters for Justice in Palestine. And in Bethesda, Maryland, Joyce Ajluni is the former director of the Ramallah Friends School, the school where all 3 of the students shot in Vermont graduated from. She's now the general secretary of the International Quaker Social Justice Organization, American Friends Service Committee. She herself is Palestinian-American. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Wafiq, you're in Burlington. Let's begin with you. Where were you on Saturday when you got the news that 3 young Palestinian students, all 20 years old, best friends, visiting one of their grandmothers for Thanksgiving, were shot?
I was at my house in Richmond. Thank you, Amy, for inviting us. I was at my house. We were organizing many activities and rallies because of what is happening on Palestine and this genocide war against our people over there. Definitely I was shocked, and our community here are terrified and angry. But Amy, we should talk about what brought this atmosphere of hate, and this is a hate crime, and we should call it as is. From the federal level, the actions of Biden administrations and Secretary of State Blinken and Defense Secretary that supporting Israel unconditionally and talking about the Palestinian victims and questioning the numbers of the Palestinian Health Ministry. This is on the federal level. And here in Vermont, for the last 2 years, we have living under siege too, from attacks from institutions here when we brought resolution to talk about Palestinian rights, human rights, and the protection of the Palestinian people. We found attacks from administrations in UVM, University of Vermont, on Middlebury, and unfortunately from many faith-based institutions. And they called us anti-Semitic. And this atmosphere will bring to the American public that if you talk about Palestinian rights, you're going to be called terrorist. If you wear a kufiya like this, you're going to be called terrorist. And this is what brought this crime, and it is hate crime. Unfortunately, our leaders here in Vermont didn't call it as is, and we should call it as is and use the right words.
And Wafiq, specifically at the press conference that was held on Monday by law enforcement, what do you believe should have been said but was not?
Well, it's, I mean, when State Attorney Sarah George mentioned it's a hateful event, but it is not hate crime. I mean, if it happened to another community, it would have been called hate crime immediately. And now there are a questioning of the mental capacity of the attacker. When it is, believe me, we feel here, if the name of the attacker is an Arab name or a Muslim name, he will be called terrorist immediately by the media, and the media will have a field of describing that person. Now, the attacker is a white supremacist, and because of the atmosphere and racism against the Muslims, the Arabs, and the Palestinians here on the state and all across the United States, we don't call it as is. At the same time, the mayor of Burlington, who opposed and he promised to reject and to veto any resolution in our progressive city, that calls for Palestinian human rights and our rights as a Palestinian American citizen and our solidarity groups to use our First Amendment and to call for the right of BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanction. And that happened a year and a half ago. You cannot have a double standard that attack us because we are activists for the rights of the Palestinian. At the same time, when something like this, you just bring sorrow and mourning and defend yourself and where you stand. You have to stand with people justice regardless. And you have to be the mayor of all the citizens. And I call for the Burlington Council members to bring a stronger resolution and mainly for ceasefire now. You know, the Palestinians are dying and we are working to stop this genocide over there. And we have our local leaders, they have responsibility to support our solidarity group and the people in Vermont and Burlington.
I wanted to ask you, the mother of one of the injured young men, Hisham Arwatani's, his mother, Elizabeth Price, has been trying to leave Ramallah and travel to the U.S. to see her son. Is there any news about whether she'll be able to come?
I don't know. I heard that she's coming. I saw a statement about that. I don't know if she's in her way already. I know a sister and her husband of another victim is here. I am in contact with the stepfather of another victim, and he told me his health is improving now, but we have to take this crime as example of what we feel and what we are experiencing here. We stand by those victims, but at the same time, I have to talk to you about the fear and the anger of our community here in Vermont, the Palestinian and the Arab Muslim community in particular, and our solidarity groups and young students who getting attacked by UVM administrations and a year and a half ago from Middlebury administration too.
I want to get to that, but I want to bring Joyce Ajlouni into the conversation. Former director of the Ramallah Friends School, the school where all three boys went to school in Ramallah. She's now the General Secretary of American Friends Service Committee, joining us from Virginia. Can you talk about where they went to school? These were three best friends, now 20 years old.
Yes, Amy, thank you for having me. As you were speaking to Afiq, I received a message from Ali Awartani and Elizabeth Price. They're saying they're on their way to America. Just to answer your question about if they are planning to come, they are en route traveling to.
And I should correct that you're in Bethesda, Maryland. Sorry, I said Virginia.
I am. No worries. That's close enough. Yes, the Ramallah Friends School was established in 1869 by Quaker missionaries. It's a phenomenal place. I'm a graduate of the school myself. My grandmother, who's a Palestinian Quaker, graduated from there in the 1920s. So this is a proud place for many of us. And not that it's educationally and academically superior than IB education, kindergarten through 12th grade, but it's also the Quaker values and the foundations of peace and nonviolence and teaching tolerance and service and integrity, conflict resolution, emphasizing dialogue and inquiry. That is what the school is about. And the track record is phenomenal when we look at our graduates and what they are up to. I think graduates say that they are who they are because of the Ramallah Friends School. So it is really a phenomenal place that has transformed the lives of many throughout generations. So So I know that Hisham, Kinan, and Tahsin are proud alums, and as I think that they're getting together, as most of us are Palestinian Americans here. I also want to share that 3 of them are Palestinian Americans, and so sometimes that's dropped from the news that 2 of them are actually American citizens, and so they are gathered. They gather together to provide solace for each other and just vent sometimes, and it's therapy to come together. And unfortunately, they have witnessed this horrific crime in the midst of them coming together to comfort each other. And I think that is what has happened, unfortunately, this time.
You posted on Facebook their poems, Tahsin's poem as well as Hisham. I'm wondering if you could read them for us. How old were they? Like in 6th grade?
They were in 6th grade. I had the privilege of being the head of school when they were in middle school. And so the librarian actually dug those up, and I will read Hisham's poem, 6th grade. Hisham, who now goes to Brown. By the way, brilliant students, all of them, accomplished, top-notch, value-driven. I wanted to say, maybe, Amy, before I read his poem, that's how selfless our students are. Hisham wrote to his professor at Brown, and I want to quote him. He said, "It's important to recognize that this is part of the larger story. The serious crime did not happen in a vacuum. As much as I appreciate and love every single one of you here today, I am but one casualty in a much wider conflict." And then Hisham goes on to say to his professor that this is why when you say your wishes and light your candles today, your mind should not just be focused on me as an individual, but rather a proud member of a people being oppressed. And so these are his words since the shooting. When he was in 6th grade in 2015, he wrote, that's Hisham Awartani, "Hope dwells in my heart. It shines like a light in darkness. The light cannot be smothered. It cannot be drowned out by tears and the screams of the wounded. It only grows in strength. This light can outshine hate. This light can outshine injustice. It outshines segregation and apartheid. As of Greek legend, Pandora opened a box. And when she did that, all the evil escaped. But luckily, Pandora closed the jar before hope could escape. And as long as hope stayed in that jar, hope would never escape. So I ask you one thing, learn from the story, learn to never give up hope, learn to let hope give power in the darkness of times, and let the light shine."
Wow. Hisham in 6th grade. And how about Tahsin?
Tahsin, there are 2 poems. I want to read one, which depicts where our students are coming from, that they are coming from living under a brutal occupation, apartheid system that agonizes them, that traumatizes them day in and day out. Children, 6th graders. So Tahsin writes, "My ears are pounding. Children dying, mothers crying, authorities lying. My ears are pounding. My ears are pounding. Missiles destroying, bombs exploding, bullets killing. My ears are pounding. Press careless, dreams traceless, lands ownerless. My ears are pounding. Kids without mothers, beds without covers, Palestine without others. My ears are pounding. My ears are pounding. There is one sound I heard, not from a breeze or a bird, the sound of darkness. My ears are pounding. My ears are pounding. I'd rather be deaf. So, I mean, that says a lot. That says a lot about where we are at today and the story of the Palestinian struggle, which is often depicted as that this all started on October 7th. And so this is 2015. And there are, when you read this poem, you feel like you're reading it about today, about our people in Gaza and what they are going through. And yet this was 8 years ago. So the struggle continues. Yeah.
And Joyce, I wanted to ask you, if you could comment on the tragic irony that the families of the victims have said in various interviews that they thought that the U.S. would be a safer place for their children than the West Bank, and then to have this terrible tragedy occur here.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think that is the absolute truth. We all, you know, I know that a large number of Palestinian students from the Ramallah Friends School attend U.S. colleges, and they're actually very sought after. And when they come here, the parents know that they are keeping them away from being subjected to violence from not just the Israeli military, but the Israeli settlers. I have a 31-year-old son there now, and I worry about his safety. The settlers have been emboldened, and there's violence there every day. And you wonder, you know, you send them here, and then this kafiyah has now become a symbol, instead of our struggle, instead of a symbol of our tradition, our traditional dress, and our struggle. And this is now being painted and tainted as a symbol of violence. And so I have another son in Washington, D.C. He doesn't leave home without his kafiyah. I wonder, I worry about him too. So that is where we're at right now. And I can't but agree with Wafiq about the dehumanization that has been taking place. And this is not new. You know, Palestinians are, you know, even in our grief, we are depicted as Palestinians dying, right? While Israelis are being killed and massacred. So language really matters. And I think that is what we have seen time and time again. You know, the 47 children died on the West Bank between January and August of this year, way before this war started. And I wonder, like, who cried for them? Who mourned them? Where was the U.S. mainstream media talking about them? And so so it's not just the language; it's also the framing, right? That this is the worst attack since the Holocaust, painting Palestinians as Jew haters, as that this is a religious struggle rather than a people seeking freedom, seeking liberation from a settler colonial system, and remembering, you know, that Palestinians of all faiths are in the same struggle as well, and they have not been offered the humanity and the dignity that they deserve. And so I think this is manifest due to the continued dehumanization, not only by the media but by our government. You know, as Wafiq said, that they continue to turn a blind eye. They're not calling for a ceasefire. They continue to embolden the Israeli atrocities by sending more aid, doubling their aid, and supporting the genocide of our people. And so that is truly the reason why this is happening. I just wanted to also take the opportunity, you know, there's this exchange of hostages, and when they talk about that, they talk about Israelis released the children. The Israeli released our children, while the Palestinians who are released are teenagers. So children versus teenagers. You know, in my book, they're all hostages. You know, the fact that the media is not talking about the 3,000 Palestinians who have been kidnapped basically since that October 10th and put in Israeli jails, and they're calling them, they're not prisoners. To them, they are bargaining chips, right? That they will use in the exchange. But to us, they are hostages, just like the hostages that are held in Gaza. And so that is the narrative that is being talked about day in and day out. And people who have sentiments that are anti-Arab, anti-Muslim are emboldened by all of that and take action, like Jason Eaton, who felt emboldened because no one is portraying Palestinians as human beings that deserve the dignity and the respect that everyone else should be, that everyone else is granted.
Jason Eaton, of course, is the alleged shooter of the 3 Palestinian young men. I want to thank you, Joyce Ajlouni, the former director of the Ramallah Friends School, where they all went to school in the occupied West Bank. All 3 students shot in Burlington, Vermont on Friday. Joyce is also now the General Secretary of the American Friends Service Committee. And I want to thank Wafiq Faour, a Palestinian refugee from Lebanon, member of Vermonters for Justice in Palestine, speaking to us from Burlington. And this final note is speaking about the Vermont representatives. You have Becca Balint, who is the first Jewish Congress member to call for a ceasefire. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders has not called for a ceasefire, but has called for conditions on U.S. aid to Israel. He said, quote, while Israel has the right to go after Hamas, Netanyahu's right-wing extremist government does not have the right to wage almost total warfare against the Palestinian people. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.
Okay, so I'm now going to introduce you to Park Avenue Synagogue, the most influential conservative synagogue in the world. The rabbi in this video would seem to the untrained ear to be a pious and enlightened individual, but make no mistake, he's a dangerous Zionist, Judophobic anti-Semite wearing Jewish clothing. There is nothing enlightened. There's nothing enlightened about what this man says. There's nothing pious about what this man says. This man is jacking off to his own worthless secular spirituality. He is a fascist, pretending to be Jewish. So, do understand that this video, I tried not to be as, I don't know, angry in this one as I had been in the previous one, but I think I was just as angry. But upon, finally wrapping this video up together, I think I'm a lot more calm in this video, except that I kind of lose my cool a little bit with this rabbi this time around. As I said before, Anti-Crusade Part 2 of 4 will probably be seen as a better video than Anti-Crusade Part 1 of 4. And hopefully Anti-Crusade Part 3 of 4 will even be better than this video. I do my best to get to every point of it, but I want everybody to understand that what he critiques is fine to critique, but you should hear it more from the point of view of Dr. Weizfeld if you're going to critique the things he critiques. He does not critique this in a way of, truly examining and self-reflecting for the Jewish nation as a whole. No, actually, the one that would be able to do that is Dr. Weizfeld, not this fake rabbi. So this came out on March 4th, 2023. And boy, is this a fucking shit show.
Shabbat Shalom. B'virkat Shalom u'ptichat lev, Shabbat Shalom, that's Seirim. מקבוצת גלילי דרימרס שבאו הבוקר לכבוד השבת, ללמוד קצת על הקהילה שלנו. אתם מוזמנים לבוא anytime you like. Welcome to the Galilee Dreamers, a group of young men and women from families Druze, Arab, and Jewish from Israel who have joined us this Shabbat. You can come here anytime you want.
In the previous video, I had said that the rabbi of the Reform Synagogue, Central Synagogue, is worse than this rabbi. This rabbi is the rabbi of the conservative synagogue, Park Avenue Synagogue. I think it's just that she's more cringeworthy, because actually, I could actually argue, and I think others could argue as well, that this rabbi might actually be worse, because instead of coming off as progressive, because, I can't think of anything more shallow, honestly, than the false binaries of progressive and regressive. So, the rabbi from the previous video, is misconceived as progressive when she's not. She's reactionary, actually. This rabbi comes off as pious and enlightened. So we can make the argument that this rabbi is worse. But it's not about which one's worse or which one's better. They're both, at the end, equally bad. This is very deceptive, what you're hearing here. So, for years, I personally, because I'm going to get into how Dr. Weizfeld speaks of it, and then, how it's evolved. I personally have always advocated for a multinational Palestinian country. Because Palestinians are Palestinian, but they're often something else as well. There are a lot of Palestinians who are Greek. There are a lot of Palestinians who are Syrian. Palestinian nationality is its own nationality, but it's a nationality also which embraces a type of pluralism. Which is why there can't be any real, contradiction between being Jewish and Palestinian at all. But there is a contradiction between being Israeli and being Druze. And you hear him talk about Arabs and Druze. And Druze are Israeli citizens, except for the fact that their language has been outlawed since 2018, I believe. This gets into the part where this perceived war, which people believe started in October 7th of this year of 2023, actually started in December of 2027. Wait, sorry, not 2027. I'm missing up my numbers. It started since 2017. So 2018, is when, I believe it was either late 2017, but I think it really was early 2018, that the language of the Druze was outlawed in Israel. Now, this man speaks more of inclusivity because, he's one of those people, like the previous rabbi from the previous video, for the two-state solution, which is already dead and murdered and gone. When really what is needed is a multinational federation. There's a book which Dr. Weizfeld put out called The Federation of Palestinian and Hebrew Nations. And the solution would be to give both national cultural autonomy, both those Jewish, not Jewish, because it's not about Jewish. Remember, there's Jewish Palestinians, and this byproduct of a group, of a culture, which assumes itself to be a nation, that call themselves Hebrews, but they don't call themselves Hebrews, but they should call themselves Hebrews because they're not really Israelis. The Palestinians would actually be the Israelis. And those that call themselves Israelis would actually be the Hebrews, given, that they are new Hebrews speaking a new Hebrew language and not the ancient sacred language, which is also why calling them Hebrews would be offensive too, and affront in a lot of ways. Ultimately, there shouldn't be much of a concern about where the Hebrews are or how they are, because they're just colonial. But at the same time, they are descendants of displaced peoples, and that's true. So really, it's like this. National cultural autonomy could technically apply to both, but national territorial cultural. I might be saying it incorrectly, but so Dr. Weizfeld will have to forgive me. But he came up with a theory. I believe it's called national cultural territorial autonomy, which this would apply to the Palestinians. That means all the land rights would belong to the Palestinians, and none of them would belong to the Hebrews. And that's a wise idea. I mean, there is a problem with the Hebrews, which call themselves Israelis, in the sense that they are a bunch of people that are largely descent from displaced peoples. There needs to be a halt on the Zionist right of return, a guarantee of the Palestinian right of return, and there should be an expulsion of Hebrews from the land, definitely. If anyone is newer than, if anybody's migration to the apartheid state of not really Israel comes, I would say, before 1967, then they definitely shouldn't be there. And even before, it can be questioned whether they should be there. It's not forced relocation when it's settlers. When the indigenous are forced out, like the way Jewish people in Europe were forced out of Europe, pretty much because after the Holocaust they weren't allowed in any countries, you know, that was a crime. That's also why the Israel Project was so successful, because the European countries did want the Jewish people to be forced into Palestine. Which is why I'm not going to take back what I said in the previous video. Europeans collectively need to pay for the Holocaust and for many other things that they've done to them, to each other and to other groups, and they should also be paying for what has been done to the Palestinians. Of course, a great deal of these Hebrews should also be paying for what's been done to the Palestinians. And I do believe that Irish people and Jewish Europeans who are anti-Zionist should oversee a lot of these matters, because most European countries cannot be trusted, not because they're innately evil. No one here believes in eugenics. No, it's because they're cultured in the wrong stuff. Colonial culture is hardly culture at all. Anyway, continuing.
With great clarity, I can recall exactly where I was on Purim Day of February 25th, 1994, the day that Baruch Goldstein entered Hebron's Cave of the Patriarchs and killed 29 Muslim worshippers, wounding over 125. I was living in Israel that year on a GAP program after college. It was a Friday. We had a free weekend in honor of Purim. And I was at a bus stop on my way to meet a cute girl I had met some months before. Her name was Debbie.
Okay, that part was actually funny because Debbie is his wife's name, so he was on his way to meet a cute girl who he would later marry. I'm not gonna lie, that part's funny.
From the payphone at the bus stop, I called my adopted Israeli family to wish them a Shabbat Shalom. And it was my host's mother, Shari, who broke the horrific news to me, telling me in no uncertain terms that I needed to be careful, steer clear of public spaces, that Goldstein's murderous rampage would undoubtedly unleash a violent response. Israel's Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, called Yasser Arafat, describing the attack as loathsome, criminal, an act of murder, and publicly denounced Goldstein on the Knesset floor as a shame on Zionism and an embarrassment to Judaism. Nevertheless, the anger on the streets overflowed. In the days that followed, Palestinian protests and riots broke out in which 5 Israelis and 25 Palestinians were killed.
Goldstein was a model citizen of the State of Israel because he was carrying out proper Zionism. It is actually the so-called Israeli citizens who consider his position extremists that are not being very good at being, you know, Zionists, because Zionism is a fascist ideology. It gets into a thing here that this is not an aberration. Goldstein was no aberration. The prime example of what a Zionist is supposed to be is Merkva, for instance. You know, when you want to know which American president properly represented the United States of America. The only one you can say that properly spoke for the United States of America was none other than Donald J. Trump, because Donald J. Trump is the perfect embodiment of Americanism. This is why the liberal talking points are so dangerous, because they allow you to console your conscience. You know, the fact of the matter remains, and this is more of a political issue than people want to say that it is, but it is very much a political issue. It's also something else, because when it comes down to it, the problem with politics is politics doesn't exist by itself. Politics encompasses your sexuality, encompasses your religiosity, encompasses your ethnicity, your culture. It encompasses your social well-being, your civic duties. Politics encompasses these things. So when there are those that say everything is political, that's a lie. Nothing's political. Actually, everything is cultural, because everything I mentioned, including culture itself, comes from culture. Politics is nothing. Politics is basically the power of forced coercion. The origin of its name, I believe, means matters of city-state, I think. But that's the thing, is that when one ignores politics, politics has a way of destroying your life. So ultimately, I think what I'm saying here is that, boohoo, Goldstein murdered people. It's sad that it happened. It's a tragedy. But the truth is, the real thing that we should be, crying and, sobbing terribly about is that there's a state of Israel to begin with. Goldstein is just part of that. And this rabbi does nothing to fix it. This rabbi is going to go on about Purim and Esther. Now, it's very important to know that Esther is one of the most important books of the Ketuvim. When you look at the Jewish scriptures, they are divided into three categories. Torah, which Torah is not just the 5 books of Moses, but when it comes to Torah scripture is, the central Torah is the book, or the Sefer Moshe is the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. All right, that's the central thing right there. Then there's the Nevi'im, which is the book of the prophets, and then there's the Ketuvim, which is basically the literature. Which means that, it's questionable how real it is, actually. In fact, that is the point of Ketuvim. Among the Ketuvim is the book of Esther, and it's one of the most important. For one thing, the divine is never mentioned in Esther, and the focus is exclusively for the Jewish people. Hitler wanted to eradicate all traces of the book of Esther. So I will also say that there is no Jewish tendency for the violence that Goldstein did. There's just Zionism. Because if you understand the actual message of the violent side, or whatever, for lack of a better word, in the book of Esther, the point is if the Jewish people are attacked, they should fight back. This actually means that if Jewish people are attacked by Zionists, they should fight back, because Amalek is the state of Israel. So let's what do we have today? We have the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is very good to its Jewish citizens. We have the state of Israel, which is very bad to its citizens, and a dependency on the evil empire of Rome, that being the United States of America, because America is Rome and Rome is the protector of Amalek. Amalek is not an ethnic group. That's very important to understand, and this is one of the reasons why Torah without Kabbalah is useless. Because Torah is largely metaphorical. That may offend a lot of people to hear that, but I often ask the question myself: are we really so arrogant to believe that the scriptures, when they were written, they were meant to be taken literally at that time? Or are we so stupid that we think that the ancients considered them literal? And the book of Esther is obviously metaphorical. And it does inspire, like, when you think of Esther, one should think of the Jewish partisans in World War II. One should not think of Zionism or the Haganah or anything like that. So, I really find this rabbi's view of the book of Esther distasteful. I want to say that to begin with. And it's just supposed to be known that Amalek is not a ethnic group. Haman. Who is Lord Haman today? Who is Lord Haman today other than Benjamin Netanyahu?
The violence, the fear, the calls back and forth to my own parents making sure I was okay. I remember it all and always, but especially during these days leading up to Monday night's festival of Purim. Vivid as my memories may be, what I didn't understand then, but what I want to share with you today is the connection between Goldstein's rampage and Purim. The reason, to the degree that one can use the word reason, why he chose to commit that heinous act on that specific day. For most of us, when we think of Purim, we think of holiday festivity and fun, costumes, groggers, and Purim spiels. We let down our hair. We poke fun at each other. It's a commandment to drink, and hopefully we'll all fulfill the mitzvah in the coming days of giving gifts to each other and gifts to the poor. Most of all, Purim is a day we set aside to read from the scroll of Esther, the tale of Mordecai's refusal to bow down to Haman and how Haman's dastardly plans to kill all the Jews of Shushan are foiled by the courageous and beautiful Esther, who, at the critical moment, saves the day by revealing her Jewish identity to King Ahasuerus by putting the needs of her people before her own self-interest. It's a fabulous story that has set sail to many sermons on topics ranging from Jewish identity in the diaspora, the role of luck and happenstance, competing models of women's leadership and leadership in general, God's role or lack thereof in this world, and of course, the threat of anti-Semitism. Not just Haman's hatred against our people, not just the hatred of his people, the Amalekites, for the Jews, but the presence and persistence of pernicious Jew hatred throughout the ages. When it comes to the Hebrew Bible, one should not pick favorites. But as a literary creation, the story of Esther is about as good as it gets. Like a royal diadem, the jewel of Esther casting light in any number of directions, producing an endless number of take-home messages. But the message we rarely discuss, that I've never spoken about until today, but's critical to talk about when speaking of Baruch Goldstein, is how the story of Esther concludes. Esther rises to the occasion, Haman's plans are foiled, and the Jews are saved. Mordecai is elevated to power, and King Ahasuerus issues another decree, this time permitting the Jews to defend themselves, the day marked for their destruction transformed into one of salvation, the Jews enjoying light and gladness, happiness and honor. But that's not where the story ends. In chapter 9, things go sideways and dark. You may know that Haman and his 10 sons are impaled at the stake. But what you may not know is that the text states that on that day, the Jews of Persia rose up to attack all those who had sought to do them harm. In the city of Shushan, 500 killed in addition to Haman and his sons, and 300 more the following day. As for the rest of Persia, a staggering bloodbath of 75,000 killed by Jews. And it's not just this one chapter. This Shabbat, the Shabbat before Purim, has a special name, Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat of Remembrance. We read a special Torah reading with verses commanding us to wipe out Amalek, blotting out the memory of our enemies and all those who would seek our downfall.
Okay, so I've already gone over why this whole reasoning is flawed. Okay, the Book of Esther is part of the Ketuvim. It's not even part of the It's not even part of the Ninivim. It's part of the Ketuvim, and therefore one should keep it in context. It is largely a metaphor to begin with. The whole point of understanding the wiping out of Amalek is to wipe out those that are actually truly against the Jewish people, which would not be Hamas, but the state of Israel. Nonviolence has not worked. Basically, the Book of Esther is a reminder that nonviolence is a ridiculous failure. As Jewish people, we are not nonviolent, we are not aggressive. this could get into all kinds of things of why the Bund does not follow everything the ultra-Orthodox says to the letter, and in many cases not following them at all, to why we do need to speak to the ultra-Orthodox and work at their level, and also understand that we should not have the egos to assume that we always know more than them, because, believe me, I have come to understand the theology behind Judaism itself, and there are a lot of misconceptions that the least of us educated are. So, for instance, unless you have been raised by the ultra-Orthodox, you probably already have a skewed understanding of what being Jewish even means. Why is the Bund necessary? Well, the Bund is necessary because the Bund is the political answer to our political problems. Politics is the power to force your will on others. And if you do not get involved in politics, politics will take away your autonomy. Hence, the Bund is necessary. Ultimately, we have to face facts that if we were to take the Book of Esther seriously, it means that we will be in a bloody conflict against the Zionists. That's what that means. Now, Dr. Weizfeld, as well as other people, have come to the conclusion that since October 7th, we've been at war with Israel. That is incorrect. We've been at war with the state of Israel since Donald Trump declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel. So that correction must be understood. Goldstein was simply a good Zionist. Zionists try to make themselves look like they're in favor of democracy, but what you see with the state of Israel represents Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is Lord Haman. And King Ahasuerus, in our time, is literally the rulership of the Islamic Republic of Iran. That may seem like a leap in logic, but it's not. Because in Iran is actually the safest place for observant Jewry. And now, less observant Jewry matters too. The Bund is inclusive to both religious and non-observant. But one must understand that it is not the religious that should submit to the non-observant. The non-observant need to understand that there are too many assumptions that are made, that they make, against the observant. And I see this all the time. It is true that religion has traumatized many people, but what people don't want to face is that secularism and atheist cults traumatize more people on a more constant basis. How many times has somebody who has a certain religion went to pray and they're instantly mocked or accused of somehow being responsible for all the ills in society, when religion has never caused war? Religion has only been used as an excuse for war. All wars, no matter what war it is, whether it claims to be a holy war, or whether it claims to be an enlightened war, or a war over the safety of the world, every war is a war that is fought over land and resources. That is all war is. It is a conflict over land and resources. And this is why socialism is important. Because war will not end with a peace pact. It will end over a caste war, or class war, if you will. It will end over something like that. And we have never had such a war. Yes, there is apparently class conflict or caste conflict to some degree or another everywhere in the world. But globally, there hasn't been a caste uprising. And if you get into every single religion, including Hinduism, the favor is towards the exploited caste. This is also why the Hindus had to reinstate the caste system when they let me rephrase that. The British reinstated the caste system when the Hindus were literally removing it from their society. You see, it's a fact that the Hindus were becoming very disillusioned with the caste system, and they realized that nothing in any of their scriptures actually justified its continuation. The only thing their scriptures ever did was explain why there was a caste system and how it occurred. And if you understand the Upanishads and all that, that's true. That everything in their scriptures, nothing in the scriptures justifies a caste system. All that's there is why there's a caste system, how it occurred. In fact, Marxists would call it dialectical materialism, historical materialism. That's what they would call the explanation given. Except that they can't do that, a great many of them. I mean, actually, there are some enlightened Naxals that do that, but, you know, you never hear about that because that would destroy the secular image of socialism, which, you know, is such a sacred golden calf, we can't ever question that. But anyway, I'm ranting here. The point is that the British came in, they killed every Brahmin that was on the side of the people, and they bribed every corrupt Brahmin they could in order to keep the caste system in India. And to this day, India suffers under the caste system. It is not the fault of Hinduism. It is the fault of the British. You see, the British, the Mother England must be destroyed, really. Like, the Welsh do deserve a country, the Scottish do deserve a country, but only the lumped proletariat of England matters when it comes to England. English culture has polluted the entire world with eugenics, with racism, with the furthering of the Inquisition that started in Spain, in many different ways and in many different philosophies. Like, they don't care about the philosophies. It's, in fact, the more philosophies England can use, the better. Ultimately, what this rabbi is implying is a false message. So here's the correct message. The book of Esther in today's time means that we are at war with the state of Israel, that Lord Haman, the descendant of Amalek, is in fact Netanyahu. And the king, you know, pretty much is the Khomeinis. And we need to plead to the Khomeinis, probably. This doesn't mean we should agree with the Islamic Republic and with their bizarre bourgeois democracy necessarily. But we should be trying to get closer to the Persians like we had in the past. You know what also is connected to Persia? India. So, like, we as Jewish people, we have completely forgotten our history. We don't understand that a lot, like, Ezra wrote metaphors, for crying out loud. Now, you can debate at the time whether he was doing it for the reasons of his own Judean supremacy, because it wasn't even Jewish supremacy, it was Judean supremacy. You can debate whether he did it for reasons of Judean supremacy or whether he did it for the theological reasons that crystallized. But all that matters is the theological reasons that crystallized. So any attempt by the Zionists to condemn Goldstein as not a good Zionist, or to uplift Goldstein as the poster boy of the Zionists, is still the work of Amalek. This rabbi is not a Jewish rabbi. He is an Amalekite rabbi. Period.
The story of Esther is hard to swallow. When taken as a whole, it's a nightmare dressed like a daydream. We rarely spotlight its ending for obvious reasons. We don't teach it to kids, but it's part of the story. No less, no more than Vashti's character, Esther's beauty, and Haman's wickedness.
Rabbi, you are speaking exclusively for yourself. No, wait, sorry, you're speaking for the Amalekites. You are part of Amalek, not Yisrael. The story of Esther is a metaphor for Jewish self-defense and the understanding that our internal enemy is those that would ensnare us to not be Jewish anymore, such as the state of Israel is doing right now. We are already criminalized. The war on terrorism was always bullshit. Terrorist is what the big army calls the little army. You know, why hasn't the Proud Boys been identified massively as the terrorist, but Antifa has? Wake up, people. This rabbi is giving the false message. The story of Esther is a story of basically a woman who did such good behavior that she rose to the prominence and saved her people. And by the way, if you read Esther, what it actually implies is that if the Jewish people are attacked, then they are to fight back, because the king cannot reverse his edict. Otherwise, he's not the king. So what the king does is he adds an extra edict. All right, well, they're going to get attacked by my armies. So therefore, the Jewish people are required to fight back if my armies attack them, which they will. And so, you know, and no punishment will be given to deserters in my army. And now, I'm not adding extra layers, and I'm not quoting the book verbatim. I'm actually just giving you the context of what's going on. the historicity of why the Book of Esther was written has no relevance whatsoever. The only relevance is its tradition. And anything outside of that tradition is usually some sort of Zionist argument. So you have Goldstein on one hand giving his view of the Amalek reasoning for Esther, and then you have this other Amalekite, a rabbi, who is basically saying the Book of Esther is a double-edged sword which has good and bad effects. Both are false. The Book of Esther is one giant metaphor. It's in, even according to many of the ultra-Orthodox rabbis, I mean, for crying out loud, it's in the Ketuvim. It's in the Ketuvim. It's not even in the Nevi'im. It's not a book of the Nevi. There's no Nevi. There's no Nephi in there. I mean, it's just this rabbi is an anti-Semite.
If you're able, I invite you to join us tomorrow morning for a study session on Esther with Dr. Alana Stein-Hain of the Hartman Institute. For me, I've always excused the 9th chapter of Esther as great literature, but not to be taken literally. Some sort of gruesome fantasy devised by the author of Esther in response to their near destruction at the hands of Haman, a cathartic psychological release written by a disempowered author on what they would imagine to do to their oppressor if only they were empowered to do so. For those of you familiar with the Passover Haggadah, it's a bit like that moment when we stand up and open the door for Elijah and we say, Shvo chamatcha, pour out your wrath on the nations, the thumbing of a nose by a people who are downtrodden at their oppressors. Alternatively, for those of you with a cinematic bent, it's a bit like Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, a brutal movie about an alternate and purgative reality in which Hitler and his henchmen are themselves violently killed. Not just the story of Esther itself, but the reception of the story throughout Jewish history. As Elliot Horowitz documented in his book, Reckless Rights, Purim and the Legacy of Jewish Violence, generations of vulnerable and oppressed Jews have turned to the story and the holiday of Purim as a vehicle for expression for their violent fantasies on what they would do to those Jew haters if only they had the power to do so.
The movie that he's referencing is Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards. Everything else here is just a non sequitur. I mean, nothing he said can't be said better. Actually, you know what? For those of you who want to do self-critical thinking about the Jewish scriptures, I advise people to not go to a rabbi of Amalek, but instead just talk to Dr. Abraham Weizfeld and simply have an academic discussion with him on that. See, I'm not going to tear down the Book of Esther when I've already explained what the Book of Esther is. There's only one way to view the Book of Esther, and that is the way that the rabbis had interpreted it. And this man is not speaking of it in the ways that the rabbis have interpreted it. You know, like, it's like this. Your obligation, if you are a rabbi of Reform, Conservative, or Reconstructionist, is to tell people the traditional view, and instead of giving your own spin, like this man is doing, to examine it in a group conversation. Now, he offers that people, be, involved in a bigger discussion, but you start with that discussion. You don't make a sermon on it. Like, this is what's polluting Judaism right now. This is why Neturei Karta has such a hard time recognizing the modern Orthodox, the Reform, the Conservative, and the Reconstructionist, is because there's no acknowledgement to what the Mizorah really is. And it's true, a lot of us don't believe in the Mizorah anymore. Clearly, the Rambam didn't. The Rambam was wrong, actually, about that, and that's not really an opinion, because the Mizorah continued. Many people know that the Zohar was actually written as a response to the Rambam. And the people who strictly have a Maimonian point of view end up becoming anti-Semites and turning against Judaism. It's just always the case. But when you look through the Zohar, you end up with a context of what a lot of the scriptures are talking about. Even the Samaritan texts, which predate the Jewish texts, are largely just stories. stories that we're not entirely clear where they came from, but we know that the stories are based on events. Some of them, you know, could be taken literally, some of them not, but, you know, it's based on collective memory. The concretizing of the past by historians is genocidal in itself, and it doesn't provide an accuracy. It's one of the problems with the modern day institutions. We don't understand the past because we don't understand the way that people chose to convey information back in those days. But we do have a window of understanding what those things are when we find ourselves in parallel situations. I myself, for the Bundist movement, am what's known as the cleric of public relations. I had largely, and still do, you know, been responsible for, you know, creating connections between the Bund and other groups that otherwise may not be able to talk to them. I've had kind of a falling out with several communists as of late, but I also still have, but I've also at the same time developed stronger connections to some other communists. But part of my duty was to, you know, build the bridges we needed between the Bund and communists, between the Bund and anarchists, between the Bund and religious groups, so that people would stop with the perception that the Bund was coming to tear down religion. Because the Bund is not about tearing down religion. The Bund is non-religious, not anti-religious. But like this spiel may sound impressive to you, to anybody, and by the way, if you don't know, spiel is a Yiddish word which means play. I may be Sephardi, but I was raised by Hasidim largely in my teens, so I picked up a lot of Yiddish terminology. And Yiddish, I would say, is appropriate because Yiddish is the only Jewish language that actually preserves Jewish Aramaic. And the language of the Jewish people was never Hebrew. It was always Aramaic. Hebrew was always the liturgical language. And this rabbi, he isn't giving you the actual way to understand this. He's responding at the time to what was going on, you know, in March, as, you know, the two-state solution idol worshippers were watching in horror as Netanyahu started to make the state of Israel what it already was and what it's always been. There is never going to be an inclusive democracy within the state of Israel. There may be measures to bring it back to that, but it was never, when it was inclusive, it was never really inclusive then either. You know, one must understand that bourgeois democracies are not democracies. The only democracies that are democracies are direct democracies. And direct democracies to function must be of socialist character, not capitalist character. And, you know, there needs to be civic power over secular and religious dominion. Civic power over secular and religious dominion. As I'd said previously in the last video, what is secular? Hospitals. The hospitals that are for everybody. I mean, you could have an exclusive hospital for a group, but if you have a hospital which is for everybody, a hospital of a cosmopolitan nature, then it will be secular. Same with the schools, same with the court system. And this gets into another thing right there, is that this does not mean getting rid of religious schools. It means that for everybody that wants to intermix in the cosmopolitanal context, you need a secular school. You need secular courts and you need secular hospitals. That has nothing to do with secularism. Secularism is an ideology, or more accurately, it is the culture of capitalism. And what this rabbi is doing is replacing Judaism with secularism. See, the Bund doesn't do that. The Bund is just political, and it's self-aware of its own politicalness, which is another reason why I won't be tolerating any more of you assholes who come up and say, holy name of the Bund, because the Bund is not a religious institution. The Bund is political. But, you know, the point is, there's not much to say about what this man is saying, because everything he's saying is a misconstruing. There's nothing progressive about what he's saying. There's nothing enlightened about what he's saying. If you really insist on tearing apart the book of Esther and examining what you may think are hidden genocidal motives, I strongly suggest to stop listening to people at Park Avenue Synagogue and actually make contact with Dr. Abraham Weizfeld.
Baruch Goldstein, he had the power, specifically a Gilon assault rifle and 140 rounds of ammunition, For Goldstein, the fantasy of Esther chapter 9 wasn't a fantasy. It was a biblical text providing license to perform a commanded act of vengeance. In Goldstein's twisted and murderous mind, the Jewish collective memory of oppression, together with the continued presence of anti-Semitism, was his prompt for violent actions. In the words of Yehuda Elkanah, an opportunity not just to assert never again, but that this must never again happen to us, even and especially that if that means shedding further blood.
Goldstein should be remembered in the same context as the terror ism, or or barbarism, more outright, the barbarism of the massacre that happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and I forget what it was, but it was the one that happened. Like, we did a whole 3-parter actually on this channel for it. I think it was called Bundist Political Awareness. The last one, part 3, actually came out on part 3 actually came out on May 27, 2019, and it had been officially uploaded hours before Donna Newman drove me to the shul, the Reconstructionist shul of Isaiah P. Kamenstein. But those are the events that, like, Goldstein should be seen in the matter of people like Jared 88. Goldstein should be seen in the same manner as the man who claims to be, under the control of the Templars in Norway, and did his acts of terror. Like that is how we should see Goldstein, and we should understand that the very motivation for Goldstein is not the Book of Esther, but Zionism. Goldstein was a good Zionist. That's all he was doing. A good Zionist murders innocent people. There is another question to be asked. Should this rabbi really be considered just Amalek? And the question really is, among Jewish people who subscribe to Zionism, the question should then be asked, how Zionist are you? Not really so much, are you a Zionist, but how Zionist are you? And in that case, if your Zionism is weak, one should try to remove the Zionism from the person. If the Zionism cannot be removed from the person, then they are definitely un-Jewish. Not Jewish at all, but in fact Zionist. And Zionism is the philosophy of Amalek, not Am Yisrael. Zionism is not even Jewish supremacy. The modern context I would give, for instance, to Jewish supremacy would be Jewish territorialism. That is actually Jewish supremacy. A more ancient example would be, well, first of all, since we are in the Hanukkah season, Hanukkah is a very important holiday because it represents resistance to assimilation. And if you are in the United States of America and you are Jewish, it actually means the complete boycotting of Christmas, because Christmas could be seen as the symbol of King Antioch. However, at the same time, I do think it's fair to say when anybody screams at a Jewish person, Merry Christmas, that we reply back, no, it's Merry Christmas, Palestine. But it's just, this whole sermon is crap. It's absolute garbage. And when it came out, it was considered so enlightened, and like, wow, man, he it's good to see that, real Zionists are critical of Israel. No. Well, that's just the problem right there. It doesn't matter how critical this man sounds. He's giving an anti-Jewish sermon about a Jewish book. Again, if you want to be critical of the Book of Esther and try to look for any hidden motives of genocide or something negative, you should stop listening to this rabbi, who's not really a rabbi, and speak to Dr. Abraham Weizfeld instead.
For me, and I hope for many of us here today, there is a direct connection between the Jewish historical memory of persecution and our present actions. In a word, the connection is empathy. As stated in the book of Exodus, you shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of a stranger, having yourselves been a stranger in the land of Egypt.
non sequitur. Obviously, the pillar, the actual foundation for Judaism is Sefer Moshe, not the Book of Esther. It's obviously, and clearly empathy. But let's get into that. Judaism, it is in there, it's in the Torah, that you shall be good to the stranger, for you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. Therefore, the state of Israel must be abolished, because the state of Israel cannot operate in that way. It is incapable. In order for it to secure itself as separate from the Palestinian nationhood, which is pluralistic, it has to create a state which wipes out the indigenous host. We must understand what the state of Israel really is. For the Palestinians, it is a cancer. For the Jewish people, it is a parasite. It is a cancer for Palestinians because it gives them cancer, in the sense that, cancer eats away at you. Like if you think of lung cancer, the cancer starts to erode the lungs and they start to break down and, bleed internally. That's how the state of Israel operates for the Palestinians. And for Jewish people, it's like a parasite. A parasite seeks to replace itself from its host victim. It is so ironic that we, the Jewish people, we were referred to as parasites by the Nazis, and the Nazis gave us a parasite called Zionism. Who funded the first settlers into Palestine? Adolf Hitler. And it is a historic fact. It's just a historic fact. This rabbi is no rabbi at all. This rabbi is a heretic.
But Goldstein's leveraged the power of Jewish memory, of vulnerability and near destruction towards ulterior and obscene ends. Why did Goldstein commit mass murder against non-Jews on Purim? Because his theology was founded not on Exodus, but on Esther, a messianic vision stemming from the fear of Jewish powerlessness, which, gun in hand, was given murderous expression on that fateful Purim day.
Rabbi, you're not a rabbi. You're an anti-Semite. You're blaming this on Judaism when the problem is Zionism. He is blaming a Jewish text for Zionist actions. This is truly anti-Semitic. It's like when people say the Talmud is the source of Zionism, when actually the most blunt texts that make Zionism impossible for you to agree with if you're Jewish is the Talmud. The Talmud renders Zionism impossible if taken seriously. The Book of Esther is not the real motivation for Goldstein. I can see how he made that connection, because many people have actually made this connection. He is not the first to do this. This analogy is actually quite old, but this is an incorrect analogy. Even if he was drawing inspiration from Esther, as many have actually already suggested, it doesn't mean anything. All it means is that what's inspiring him is Zionism. Goldstein's murderous rampage was exclusively inspired by Zionism. There is no other way of interpreting that. The state of Israel must go. Judaism, yes. Zionism, no. The state of Israel must go. Long live the boon. We want to see every Jewish person have religious services, food, shelter, protection, and national cultural autonomy. Our liberation must not come at the expense of other people's liberation. And furthermore, there is no Jewish liberation without Palestinian liberation. And to do that, the state of Israel must cease to exist.
Goldstein was beaten to death that day by survivors, but the ideology by which he lived did not die. Denied burial in a Jewish cemetery by the Israeli military, his gravesite nevertheless has become a pilgrimage site for Jewish extremists. The epitaph of his gravestone calling him a martyr who died with clean hands and a pure heart. Far more worrisome to me than where his remains are buried is where his spirit lives on. No different than in times ago, Jews are living in the midst of a push and pull of the story of Esther, a dialectic between vulnerability and power. None of us have to look far to see the Hamans of our time, those who would seek the destruction of the Jews. Take your pick. Last weekend's neo-Nazi day of hate, the anti-Semitic rally outside the Broadway performance of Parade, a play about the lynching of a Jew, Leo Frank, Farrakhan's most recent tirade against the Jews, hateful graffiti sprayed on the walls of synagogue, or in the last 24 hours, the arrest of a Michigan man who had been plotting to kill elected Jewish officials. The threats are real, and we are not wrong to feel vulnerable. As Jews, we know full well the threats we face in the diaspora and against our brothers and sisters in Israel who live under the threat of an imminently nuclear Iran, a hostile and rocket-firing series of proximate neighbors, and a terror-rewarding Palestinian Authority.
You know, this is one of the things that makes me the most angry in this whole diatribe that this guy is spewing out. Because I don't have any brothers and sisters in the Zionist state. I had brothers and sisters, well, I mean family members in Lebanon. My family lived throughout the Arab world and Europe. As far as I understand, I am the last person with my surname now. Words cannot express the anguish I have for the bizarre, twisted, anti-Semitic interpretations that this so-called rabbi has. Nothing he says merits anything. Many people interpret this very sermon as some enlightened statement, even though speeches, sermons, and services on Shabbos, or Shabbat as it's called in Hebrew, are not supposed to be recorded. Mind you, this is a conservative synagogue, not an Orthodox synagogue. Nonetheless, this message bears no fruit except taking away the guilt from the guilty and putting it actually on Judaism. Goldstein was inspired by the Book of Esther. The problem must be Judaism. Well, no, actually, Goldstein was a Zionist. It's pathetic, really.
Make no mistake, the world's most ancient hatred is alive and well today, online, on the streets, and on the world stage. The Jews being made other, depicted as menacing, powerful, and threatening, and then rendered an object of hatred and violence. We must stand vigilant. We must fight to secure the well-being of our people in the diaspora and in Israel.
Judophobic anti-Semitism is very much still alive. There's no dispute over that. But the biggest instigator of Judophobic anti-Semitism is the very existence of the State of Israel, which does not help the Jewish people, provides no security for the Jewish people, and the concern should be for the Jewish diaspora. And any Jewish dissident within the State of Israel that rejects the State of Israel is also part of the diaspora. The diaspora matters. Medinat Amalek does not. The State of Israel does not matter. The only thing that matters about the State of Israel is its abolishment, is that it has no right to exist. It never had a right to exist. The Jewish masses were telling the United Nations, we don't want a state, and they were ignored. Why? Because secularism is a form of chauvinism. It's when you take the secular principle, which is a real thing, and turn it into an ideology as a way to assimilate everyone. It's capitalism. Secularism is the culture. Capitalism is the economy. It's the same thing. That's part of the problem with the Marxists and the anarchists alike, is they don't understand that they'll never overcome capitalism because they can't confront what its culture is. This rabbi, this not really rabbi, he's not identifying the problem. He's looking at symptoms because he's part of the problem. Eldridge Cleaver said in, I believe it was Soul on Ice. Eldridge Cleaver was a Black Panther, by the way. He said in the book Soul of Ice, which I haven't read in years, and I actually had an original copy, from an original print copy back in the day. He said in there, you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. This fake rabbi is part of the problem.
and the perpetrators of violence against our people must be brought to justice. And we must never, ever let the historic memory and lived reality of anti-Semitism provide cover for the violent excesses of an unhinged and messianic abuse of Jewish power. The vigilante settlers who rampaged through the Palestinian town of Huwara in the West Bank this past week committed a pogrom that is a travesty of every human and every Jewish value. It is an outrage. The fact that it happened, the fact that the perpetrators have yet to be brought to justice, and the fact that Bezalel Smotrich, a high-ranking minister in Israel's government, has subsequently called for that town to be wiped out.
Goldstein should be seen in the context, the same context as the one who murdered the people at the Tree of Life synagogue, and that maniac in who was in New Zealand, who killed people in the mosque. It was the area of the land is that place is called the Christ Church. The Christ Church shooter, as he's called, where he massacred people at the Christ Church mosque. That is the vein in which Goldstein should be seen. It would seem, like I said before, he sounds like such a dissident, this fake rabbi, for bringing up, the settlers. But that incident of which he refers is not new. None of this is new. This is brainwashing. This is how a rabbi, not really a rabbi, throws away Judaism and puts secularism in its place. This man has money, by the way. You know how rich this guy is? This man is an enemy of the Jewish proletariat. And let's clear something else up. Whatever the Jewish proletariat was from the 1900s to the 1940s is not relevant today. What's relevant today is, what is the Jewish proletariat today? The Jewish proletariat today is a Jewish lumpen proletariat. And, the caste of lumpen proletariat is the most revolutionary force in the world. Not just for the first world, but for the areas where this exists in the third world as well.
Jews, to be sure, are not the only people in whose ranks the memory of persecution and victimization has been leveraged towards acts of violent aggression. The example of the Serbs is but one of many examples that come to mind. But it is, as Jews, perhaps more than any other people, who would be well advised to consider how the memory of victimization, when combined with the apparatus of state power, can lead to violent injustices perpetrated against others. Israel is on the precipice, the fabric of Israeli society unraveling before our eyes. And I am frightened, very, very frightened, as to what might happen in the coming days as the tinderbox that is the Jewish state comes into contact with the match of a theologically fraught holiday. It's not merely that the specter of Baruch Goldstein and the hateful ideology he espoused continues to loom large. Until recently, Itamar Ben-Gvir had a framed picture of Goldstein on his wall. Itamar Ben-Gvir is not an outlawed fringe figure. In this new government, he's a minister of security overseeing the police. If, God forbid, violence breaks out this Purim, whose side will he be on? The side of calm or the side of bloodletting? It's enough to keep me up at night. It should be keeping all of us up at night. As American Jews, we neither vote in Israel nor do we serve in its military. Ours is a bit part.
And yet the state of Israel seems to somehow dictate Jewish life within the United States. That's called a dictatorship. And of course, the state of Israel looks at Goldstein as as a great figure, because the state of Israel has finally come into its own nature. This fake rabbi is either in denial about what Zionism really means, or he is a willing deceiver. And I go with the latter. Nobody can be that charming, that pretty looking, at that age too, without being very well manicured, because Jewish people, man, it's not that we don't age well, but we don't age that pretty unless we're that well manicured, unless somebody's, paying for your way to all kinds of, luxuries. This guy is as bougie as it gets. In fact, I indict this man as not even part of the Jewish aristocracy within the United States, but the Jewish bourgeoisie in the United States, and also, therefore, very much un-Jewish by his Zionism. I denounce Park Avenue Synagogue. Every Bundist should.
In this unfolding drama, our powers are far more modest than our passions. There's not a whole lot we can do, but we do have a choice to make. It is our Esther moment. Will our vision for the Jewish people be one that stems from fear, hatred, and demonization of the other, or will we offer a vision and a path of dialogue, trust building, and bridge building? Will we turn inward, crouching tightly into a defensive posture, or will we stretch outside of our comfort zone and break bread with one another and seek to strengthen our shared future? Will we lay all the blame at the feet of the other side, condemning only their crimes, or will we also turn the moral mirror onto ourselves and call out the ugly elements within our own people?
The ugly element within our own people would be very different than what you're describing. The ugly element within our own people, or my people, not your people, Rabbi of Amalek, would be the way that we don't engage in the proper discussion about how multiple choice Orthodox Judaism probably is, or that we need to be more understanding to Reform Judaism, Conservative Judaism, and Reconstructionist Judaism, because in this high-tech capitalist world, and for Jewish people to survive, it's very hard to live the full Jewish life and the full Jewish context in a high, fast-paced capitalist society. That is where the ugly element is in, that we are not confronting ourselves. Our ugly element is that we were silent when that anti-Semitic four-part film series Unorthodox came out, simply with the purpose of demonizing Jewish people in Satmar, and it's been very effective. I have been part of the ugly element. I should have endorsed what Dr. Weizfeld said when he said that The Big Bang Theory is an anti-Semitic show, because it is. Who cares if it's primarily made by Jewish people? That doesn't mean shit. Seinfeld is an anti-Semitic show. Who cares if Jerry Seinfeld is from Jewish stock? We have to understand that what makes you Jewish, what constitutes proper Jewish nationality, is Torah culture and the Sinai covenantal religion. And for some Jewish people, they only will follow the Sinai covenantal religion, which is as what's seen in Satmar. And for others, they will follow the Torah culture, for instance, which is what's seen in Chairman Dr. Weizfeld. I'm not saying that he doesn't do the religion, but he's more about the cultural side of Judaism. I don't like to distinguish between the Torah culture and the Sinai covenantal religion, because they're both Judaism. But regardless, the simple truth is, all of Zionism, all of Amalek, Kol Amalek, is indicted with each other. The divestment has begun. It began some time ago, but we must confront the state of Israel for what it is, Amalek. You want to find, you want to talk about the persecuted? Where were all? You want to talk about the ugly element of Jewish people, for instance, within the United States? Why didn't enough of us recognize the Armenian genocide, which was the first Holocaust, not just a genocide, it was the first Holocaust? Of course, there was another Holocaust that happened around that time around Africa, and I can't remember what that was called, but that should be counted too. What has happened now in Gaza is a Holocaust. We should be against all Holocausts, never again for anybody. You sound so inclusive to the untrained ears. I think your name's Crossrove. I can't remember. It's sad. It's true. Park Avenue Synagogue has the best cantor in the world. We need cantors that sound better than their cantor, and that would be very hard to do because Park Avenue Synagogue does have the best cantor in the world. It's not fair. We have been robbed by the Zionists. This man is part of that robbery.
Will our experience of Jewish vulnerability be leveraged as a moral cudgel to excuse Jewish violence, or will it be a prompt for empathy? We are Jews. We do not turn the other cheek, but we do, we can, and we must be ever willing to be open to the possibility that tomorrow can be better than today. To live by the maxim, to whom evil is done, do evil in return, is to resign ourselves to an unbreakable cycle of violence. As Reverend King preached, returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. This Purim, I pray that light and love reign supreme, and that all people enjoy the blessing of light and gladness, happiness and honor, and most of all, shalom, peace. Shabbat shalom.
It is true, we the Jewish people do not turn the other cheek, but let us not misunderstand what that means. We are not nonviolent. We're not supposed to be nonviolent. Nonviolence is something that's happened. We've been fed through ghettoization. But we are non-aggressive. We are not the aggressors. The state of Israel is the aggressor. This whole thing where there's extremism on both sides is a lie. There isn't extremism with the Israelis and with the Palestinians alike. That's a lie. Hamas is not the danger that you think it is. It can be said perhaps what Hamas did on October 7th was perhaps an act of terrorism. You could probably make that argument. But this actually exposes why the war on terror is a fascist carried out plot. Why is it that we are all collectively now so much more afraid of terrorism, but we don't suspect the fascists around the corner that are always there, that are in the government, that are infecting civil society with their lies and with their hatred? Can you fight hatred with love? That's questionable. Hatred is a form of love. If you think about the devotion that it takes for love, and then you think about the devotion it takes for hate, hate would be an inversion of love. It would be like love, love inverted onto itself. It would be the love turned inside out. To fight hatred, let's stop talking about fighting hatred. We'll talk about justice now. There is no peace without justice. Stop asking for peace and ceasefires and demand justice. But justice will not come unless the state of Israel is dismantled. We are Jewish people, and we do not turn the other cheek, but we are not the aggressors. This sermon, which sounds very enlightened to many people, is a trick. So that you're like, okay, it's not Zionism, it's Zionist extremism. No, it's Zionism, that is the problem. We have a particular problem in our society, and what I mean that I'm transcending Jewish people, I mean we as humans. There is a common misperception that we, the Jewish people, believe ourselves to be superior to everybody else because we're the chosen or something like that. But if you understand how Judaism actually works, we don't really call ourselves the chosen people. We are chosen in the sense that Abraham chose God. That is how it works. That's their tradition. And the least observant of the Jewish people never make any reference to chosen because that is exclusively a religious concept, which basically starts like this. There was Abraham. Then Abraham had Isaac and, he had Ishmael and then Isaac, okay? Ishmael would later, the promise to Ishmael that he would be so numerous would be fulfilled in the fact that the Arabs cover what is known as the Middle East and the fact that Islam is considered the fastest growing religion. So Muhammad fulfilled the promise to Ishmael. With Isaac came Jacob and Esau. From Jacob comes the Jewish people. From Esau comes the Christians. And we know this because this gets back into a thing that I was saying before. You see, Hanukkah is a good thing. What the Maccabees did was necessary for Judea. But the dynasty that came from the Maccabees was Jewish supremacy. And here we get into a special difference that must be understood between Zionism and Jewish supremacy. You see, this is why I oppose Jewish territorialism, is because it looks like the Maccabee dynasty, but just in places that are not the Holy Land. The Maccabees forced the children of Esau to convert to Judaism. The children of Esau were very friendly with the Greeks and then later the Romans. So when you understand what Christianity actually is, you understand that these are the children of Esau, the Edomites. Because when the Nazarene went around with his message, this appealed to people who didn't care about Judaism. And this should be evident in if you actually read the Jewish, like because the Gospels are not Jewish. Even the one that's considered the Jewish Gospel, the Gospel Matthew, is not Jewish. It's called Christian. Christianity is the result of people trying to reconcile how the person that these people thought were the Messiah, how he died, which is not how the Messiah is supposed to be. The message that Jesus spoke resonated less and less with Jewish people over time and more with Edomites. So we have to understand that if we are to really call out the bad element on ourselves, it has nothing to do with Israel. It has to do with the fact that we are directly responsible for both Christianity and Islam's existence. You see, with Ishmael, you have to understand that the way that this works is the Jewish people were in Persia. You know, we're talking of Ezra, right? Well, what was the religion? The religion, I'm probably not pronouncing this very well, and I never seem to pronounce this word very well, but I'll just say Zarathustra's religion. That's the monotheist religion of Persia. The father of Islam is Zarathustra's religion. Zarathustra was a monotheist, okay? The monotheist religion, and that's why Islam is a monotheist religion. Not because of Judaism, because Judaism is a panentheist religion. That's not to be confused with pantheism. Panentheism, not pantheism. Pantheism is all is one. Panentheism is all is inside the divine. All right, you have to understand that. Okay, so Judaism gave birth to a Trinitarian religion and more accurately, it's sired as the father. Judaism is the father of Islam and it is the father of Christianity. Christianity is a Trinitarian religion. It's not the first Trinitarian religion. The mother of Christianity is what we today call Wicca. And Gardner did not create Wicca. This is a big mistake people make. Gardner gave Wicca the name, and he supposedly added Masonic rituals, which are not really Masonic rituals. This really just goes back to the ancient institutions of the Magi, which people have asked me, which I will no longer be explaining to people because people will ask me to explain that to them, and then I will be accused of like brainwashing them when really all I'm showing you is the original parapsychology. So, and that's an anti-Semitic attack on me that I've had to deal with currently. But this is the thing. There is a fear of anti-Semitism, which is completely justified. But first, let's put this in context. Anti-Semitism is Judeophobia and Islamophobia. As far as Judeophobic anti-Semitism goes, it would be probably not disappeared. It probably wouldn't go away completely, but it would be brought down to a 2% level if the state of Israel ceased to exist. Because the number one cause today of Judophobic anti-Semitism is the state of Israel. So, to call out the ugly element in ourselves is to call out Jewish supremacy, which has nothing to do with the state of Israel. We have to confront the fact that we actually have an enemy wearing our face. Amalek has become more powerful than before because now Amalek is masquerading as us. Now, Amalek, if you recall, is like the grandson of Esau. You know, but Amalek is also mentioned before the birth of Amalek. So this gets into another thing. The Israelites, the Edomites, and the Ishmaelites, these are all, yes, you could say that these are all ethnic groups. And obviously, you don't have to be an Ishmaelite to be a Muslim, and you don't have to be an Edomite to be Christian, and you don't have to be an Israelite to be Jewish. And obviously, Israelites converted to different religions, and same is true of Ishmaelites, same is true of Edomites. So get ethnicity out of the context of the children of Abraham. But as far as these tribal groups are concerned, Abraham, the children of Abraham, that being the ones of Ishmael, the ones of Jacob, and the ones of Esau, these are ethnic groups, yes, but not the Amalekites. The Amalekites, okay, the children of Amalek, are not an ethnic group. Theologically speaking, and this becomes very clear if you study Rashi, they are actually a reference to an external problem. Not an external problem, an internal problem, not coming from outside the Jewish people, but from within the Jewish people as not Jewish. You know, usually Amalek is brought out by outside forces, and someone within the Jewish community picks up and says, hey, that's a good idea. So Christian Zionism, for instance, predates Jewish Zionism. The Zionists, the Jewish Zionists, the poster boys for secularism, they were inspired by the Christian Zionists. At the time, Christian Zionism was not called Christian Zionism, it was called Restorationism. So, in closing with this rabbi is providing a dangerous false message. He is not a rabbi. He is not from Am Yisrael. He's from Am Amalek because he supports the state of Amalek, which falsely calls itself Israel. And if we are to win this war against Amalek, we have to spread this information. We have to be, in mass demonstrations, against the state of Israel. And we need to stop thinking about nonviolence. Nonviolence hasn't served us well. It serves no one well. Pacifism and nonviolence are the enemy. If you believe in nonviolence, what you actually believe in is Stockholm Syndrome. The only good that nonviolence serves is as a tactic and a tactic alone. Once nonviolence becomes the philosophy, you're begging for Stockholm Syndrome. So, what we need to do is be ourselves, non-aggression. We defend ourselves when necessary. We join in the correct war at the correct time when necessary, and we fight on the side of the Palestinians against the state of Israel. And if it comes to that, and do understand, it's very likely that the United States of America will at some point finally give up on the state of Israel. Well, will that be good for us? Yes and no. It will be good for us because the state of Israel will be no more, but it will be bad for us because they will blame this on Judaism. It's very likely that the United States already has a strategy because they always have contingency plans. We don't know what's in their files, but when you look at the fact that things like Unorthodox, Big Bang, Seinfeld, these things are full of anti-Semitism, run amok on airwaves, and the very deliberate anti-Semitic culture of the United States, it's very obvious that if the United States of America is to cut ties with the state of Israel and they are to recognize that the state of Israel is apartheid, they will not blame Zionism. They will blame the entire Jewish diaspora nation, despite the fact that we opposed Zionism before any Muslim or Christian had, before any Palestinian had. This being lost in the historic narrative is a form of genocide. We're going to continue with what we had yesterday with Dr. Weizfeld's conversation with Ahmed from Palestine, and Steve's struggle is visible there, but I'm pretty sure that his recording equipment or his microphone wasn't working. But we're going to continue with that conversation, which is essential for understanding what we must do and what's to be done concerning the problem of Zionism and the security for the Jewish people and the Palestinian people that we may receive our autonomy.
And Egypt also. Yeah. Yes. So versus their gas, they don't want from Russia. So this is a huge event. You could see why this is one aspect of why the West are complicit in this genocide.
And to sell it to the Israeli public, they created all of these, delusions about the Hamas being Nazis. They even try to use the term, to describe Hamas has accurately referred to the Zionist administration as Nazis.
They are.
Yeah.
They are doing. Actually, yesterday I was talking with a friend of mine. Actually, the Zionists surpassed the Nazis in their deeds and their words. The Nazis looked at the Jews and other Slavic nations as inferior beings to the Aryan people, but they still look at them as people. Whereas the Zionists, they looked at the Palestinians as animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're really surpassed their evilness to the Nazis in their narratives. I'm not saying about their deeds, but their narratives, which is actually the deed is despicable as the Nazis.
The basic premise there is true, but I would only say that, to be more precise, because Nazis did refer to Jewish people as rats, but more precisely, the Nazis looked upon the Jewish people as subhuman, whereas the Zionists don't even look at Palestinians as subhuman. They look at them as animals. And it can be disputed whose deeds are worse, the Zionists or the Nazis, but ultimately, for Jewish people, the Zionists are worse. You see, the Nazis come openly to hate the Jewish people, whereas the Zionists also hate the Jewish people, but they do so pretending to be Jewish themselves. Taking and kidnapping Sephardi and Mizrahi children and completely robbing them of their culture and putting a false culture in them is worse. Nazis are worse than Zionists on so many levels. And Zionists a lot, to more or less kind of are Nazis, especially if we're talking Kahanists. Kahanists are Jewish National Socialists. Well, not even really that. They're Zionist National Socialists. So Kahanists are definitely Nazis. And yes, of course, Zionists say, we are Jewish. And so a lot of people say, well, you can't say that Zionism is not Jewish because they say they're Jewish. In this same point of logic, you can say, then therefore this means that the Ku Klux Klan represents the Christians more than anybody. Of course, this is not true. So you have to think of the same equivalent. ISIS doesn't represent Muslims. The Ku Klux Klan doesn't represent Christians, and the Zionists don't represent the Jewish people. But even more than that, the problem being, I would say the Ku Klux Klan is not really Christian at all, ultimately. It's Protestant. And ISIS, you could say, is more of an aberration. Zionism, more than that, is very foreign to Jewish people. Zionism started as a Protestant Christian ideology, and the Jewish Zionists hated everything Jewish. And this is showing itself all the time now. Meir Sharim, a Jewish neighborhood outside of the old city, it's within metropolitan Jerusalem, but it's outside of the old city of Jerusalem. Meir Sharim is a neighborhood of Jewish Palestinians. You can also, you should also know that in Meir Sharim, there are Ashkenazim, Sephardim, and Mizrahim. Everybody over there speaks Yiddish, and some speak Yiddish and Arabic. Overall, though, what Ahmed is saying is true.
Yes, Netanyahu, King Bibi, he even refers to Palestinians as Amalek. Amalek, was a group that attacked a couple of nomadic Hebrews with Moses, and in revenge, they went and massacred the entire nation or something like this.
That's true.
According to the Ezra, the editor, like a story which doesn't exist in the Samaritan Torah. It's, like some story that was made up. And it's, made up to justify genocide. There's this, tendency, genocidal tendency inserted into the Jewish religious texts that hadn't existed there previously. Even Jericho was, in effect, an Egyptian massacre and not a Hebrew massacre, but it was written up, as a Hebrew massacre in order to create an aura of power.
I'm actually very glad that Dr. Weizfeld brought this up, because this echoes something I've been saying a lot on this channel, and that's that Amalek is a story. Now, I'm not so sure if I completely agree with Dr. Weizfeld that Amalek was invented to justify massacres. Of course, at the same time, given the fact that Ezra was carrying out Judean supremacy, that might be true historically. However, the theological context of Amalek is not Hamas, is not anything Palestinian. The actual theological context of Amalek is whatever the eternal Jewish, whatever the enemy of the eternal enemy of the Jewish people is. And actually, the Zionist collection is Amalek. That is, like, if you get into Judaism, what is Amalek? Amalek is the Zionists. Amalek is the state of Israel. So they're misusing, number one, they're misusing Amalek, the theology, which is Amalek is exclusively a theological concept. It is not a historical context. And I mean, but at the same time, it is likely that Ezra was, taking certain liberties. It is known that Ezra was a scribe. He was not a prophet. He was not even in the same context as Daniel. Daniel was not a prophet either. Daniel was a dreamer. He had prophecy, but he was not a prophet. He was a dreamer. And he basically a dream oracle. He received night visions in his sleep. Ezra, on the other hand, was only a scribe, and he was an editor. He did put additions into the scriptural context. Another thing that should be known, which is not very well known, is that the Samaritans look favorably on King Saul, whereas the Judeans did not look on Saul favorably. They looked upon King David as favorable. The Samaritan culture and Samaritan religion does not look favorably upon King David. They look favorably upon King Saul. Now, and then if you go back even further than that, the idea of a Jewish king was considered more or less, like dubious. It wasn't like, and this gets into the difference between a king and a monarch. First of all, every monarch is a king or an emperor, but not every king is a monarch. Kingship is a lot more complicated, as it is actually a very cultural thing. However, at the same time, one could argue, and Dr. Weizfeld definitely argues this. I don't argue this as strongly, but I do think that it deserves the consideration, because there is a point here that Dr. Weizfeld brings out, which I reinterpret slightly different, but it comes out the same, and that's that the book of Samuel seems to suggest that it would be dangerous for Jewish people to have a king, because when the Israelites wanted a king, this would come with a lot of issues. And it does seem that the kings of Israel and Judah did degenerate into monarchs. So perhaps that is the warning, is that only God is the king, and that if you have a human king, he will degenerate into a monarch. And that argument can be made, and possibly should be made. Now, I don't advocate the complete abolishing of natural kings, because kings don't have to be monarchs. The word king is interchangeable with chief, as in tribal chief, and stuff like that. In fact, that's what the original term for king in English would actually be kinsman. So that's a lot more complicated. It cannot be made so simple. At the same time, again, the book of Samuel does seem to suggest that having kings over the Israelites would be a disaster, and it did turn out to be a disaster. This is important to note. The accusation upon Palestinians as being Amalek is incorrect on all fronts. If you look at it historically, there wouldn't have actually been an Amalek, and if you look at it from the point of view of Judaism, the state of Israel is the only thing that you can call Amalek.
In order to create, some sort of a kingdom, even though in the Torah it mentions as well that King David was not allowed to build a temple because he had blood on his hands. At the same time, the Torah has this, throws both, versions, of Judaism into the same sort of sack. This is Ezra, the editor. It's, been corrupted. You have to look to, like Natura Carta to find out what real Judaism is.
I mean no offense to my Muslim friends, brothers and sisters and comrades when I say this, but this is that corruption also carried into Islam. While Islam does not allow for kings and caliphs, even though certain caliphs did operate as kings and even furthermore monarchs, this was not really allowed in Islam. Theologically. However, when I say it was carried over, one must understand that the point of view of Ezra is carried over in both Christianity and Islam. So what Dr. Weizfeld is referencing here is very correct. Both versions of Judaism would be in the Torah, but the Zionists do not have any claim on either version. So the more anarchic Judaism is in the Jewish texts, and the more proto-monarch version of Judaism is in the text. But the Zionists cannot claim either, because even in the Judean supremacist position, the Zionists don't have a right to claim it. They don't have rights to it, because even basically in the theology of Judaism, Judean supremacy and Jewish supremacy is abolished because of the exile. You see, after the destruction of the first temple upon Zion, there was a 70-year period of exile. After that 70-year period, Judea was restored. Judea basically was the land of the Benjaminites and the Judahites. The Judaites and the Benjaminites came together with their Levites and formed Judea with the help, permission, and encouragement of the Persian Empire. And what do we have today? We have the Zionists who hate Iran, who have convinced the whole world, well, not the whole world, but a great deal of the Western world, that the big enemy of the Jewish people is Iran, when actually, no, Iran would be like the most friendly to Jewish people. So they don't have a right to either side. Now, this gets into what I said again. Orthodox Judaism will inevitably have to evolve into a multiple choice religion, which will have to include the Samaritans. The word Yehudi does predate the word Yehuda, and I did my best to explain that in the previous video, and I don't want to go too far into it, but the fact is, this conversation is probably one of the most important conversations that Dr. Weizfeld has had with his comrades on this subject, because this use of the term Amalek is completely inappropriate by the Zionists to even do that. Because number one, historically, there was no actual ethnic group called Amalek. And then also, theologically, Amalek would be the state of Israel.
Being the biggest armed garrison in the Middle East.
Yeah. With a collective consciousness that can be described as a collective psychosis. It's a psychotic trauma, which it's projected itself on top of the Hamas, as if, Palestinians, were the Nazis, like they're jumped from one historical epoch into another, pretending that they're fighting, the Second World War, when in fact the Zionists ran away and didn't even fight against the Nazis in the first place. And
they were collaborating with them. They were collaborating with them.
Making deals with them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Zionists, they were just running away from fighting the Nazis. Actually, they were reports. Well, not reports, it's a fact that the Warsaw Ghetto guards, many of them were Zionists.
Oh, 67.1% of the ghetto police were Zionists.
Yes.
A study was done. Yes.
I wish that some Zionists listen to this and go look through the history books, and you could see their heroic forefathers in Zionism. They were nothing but Nazi collaborators killing Jews in Warsaw.
Okay, we've got a minute to conclude here.
Yes.
So what can we do? Like next week, next day, what's to be done type thing?
I think we have to continue doing what we do.
Steve.
Right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Let's Steve. I didn't hear from Steve.
Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. You're still muted. You're still muted, Steve. Okay, so Okay, I'm going to go back to the Jewish Community Center. But last week I was all myself. Like I was just one. Another, ACJC, Alliance of Concerned Jewish Canadians member came as well, but he came too late. And missed me. But they're all old members. And nobody's, can be an activist like me. 75. Okay, Steve is here. Okay, so what should we do?
We have to keep doing what we're doing: educate, agitate, organize. Everything that's going on now, we have to continue, because those are the weapons that we have, and we seem to be doing them the best we can. And demand justice, demand an end to the occupation, demand an end and into the bombing. There's so many more things we can demand, but we have to keep doing what we're doing. We have to keep on walking this walk. That's it.
So, like about 60% of the American public are now, for a ceasefire, from what I understand. So, there's, but, it's the Democrats and Republicans both, are so crazy Zionist. This is,
Yes.
Yes,
they are.
This is, too much to take, but, too much to tolerate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, the Congress, I don't have any faith in the Congress or the White House or the imperialist establishment, either in the United States, Canada, to that, the Western Europe. I have faith in the people, the grassroots movement, to put pressure on those in order to move. Otherwise, they're not going to move by themselves.
Yeah. Leave them with no choice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Very good. Okay. That's a good note to end on. Thank you very much.
I'm going to have to finish this commentary out of sequence because, some points are more stronger than other points. So just bear with me. But this signing off was very appropriate, I think.
The West Bank is coming into play. The West Bank is in revolt as well now.
Oh, yes. Yesterday were 17 martyrs. The day before, 20 martyrs. Total martyrs being murdered by the Zionist gang army since the beginning of Al-Aqsa operation, or we call it Tufan Al-Aqsa, or the Al-Aqsa flood. 180 Palestinians been murdered by the Zionists, about a third of them children, over 1,000 injured. Many are in critical condition, and they're not Hamas. They're just innocent people going by their own life, doing their own life, while the Zionist squatter colonists and the army attacking them in their olive groves or on the roads or even in their own homes.
Yes. This is the incursions, into Sector A, which they promised to stay out of. They're not supposed to. It's supposed to be to the authority of the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority lets them come in as well. They just make a schedule.
That's another story unfolding. The PA is something of the past after October 7th. It's gone. No more PA. I believe.
Oh, but they've offered to take over control of the Gaza Strip. Abbas said
it's just wishful thinking and dream by the U.S. They're trying to. It's like like gimmick, playing games that they're sure that the Israelis will take care of Gaza and defeat Hamas, and we're talking about the day after. No, there'll be no day after for you.
So the U.S. is sort of crucial in all this, but there's no hope, in the U.S., for a ceasefire. Even, one of the members of the squad, who spoke out, was censured, by the Congress or the Senate or something, by Congress, and the last 12, perhaps who vote for a ceasefire. Everybody else wants war.
Yes.
And thus what we're seeing is contradictions arising as empires fall.
This is their project. The Zionist entity is the Western imperialist project. It's a bridgehead
of the Western imperialists in the middle of the Arab world.
Yeah.
This is how they envision it.
Yeah.
This is another, as I said before, this is another crusade kingdom.
Yeah.
This time they are using the Jews.
Or mercenaries.
Yeah, this is the first one. They get rid of the Jewish question in Europe.
Yes.
This is a final solution where Hitler killed. Now they they continue the job of Hitler by sending the Jews to Palestine to do their dirty job. And the Jews, sadly, who are the Zionists, I'm not so when I call them Jews, the Zionists, they were gladly to do the dirty job of the West.
Yeah.
To be anti-Zionist is to be anti-Crusade, and to be anti-Crusade is to be anti-Zionist. The connection is made very clear here, and that's one of the reasons why this, with the rest of the presentation, which was started in the previous video, why I'm putting this out of sequence, because I think some points highlight over other points to get this message across. Zionism is a continuation of the Crusades. There's an entire continuity from the Crusades all the way up to the Christian Zionist movement, to the secular, self-hating Jewish people, like the self-hating Jew guys, which are basically the Jewish Zionists, such as Herzl and Jabotinsky and all these other guys, to Adolf Hitler, to the founding of the State of Israel. This is all part of the same crusade. And it should be clear at this point that that's what's happened here.
Any regime that doesn't stop a genocide, has discredited itself and will disappear.
It's finished.
I don't disappear. Yeah.
I do believe that the events of October 7th put the seeds for the end of the Zionist entity in the middle of the Arab world.
Yes.
So more, the massacres they are committing against the Palestinians we will not forget. Let's put it this way.
But this is just the beginning. This is going to continue, and it's going to expand now as well. Even inside of Israel, the fascists are talking about, like attacking the Democrats and the anti-Zionists, they call them. Yeah. They threaten to kill them. Yeah.
Well, I would not be surprised if I seeing the Zionists aiming at each other, killing at each other. There's a big problems inside the Zionist entity. Vast majority of squatters in northern Palestine, they left. They are in the center.
125,000, yeah.
Yeah, the ones in the south near Gaza, they left. They are in the center. They're fighting among each other. There's people are going out demonstration. Please bring our prisoners back home, while others calling them traitors. So it doesn't take much before somebody pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
And I could see that.
They're not even willing to exchange, Palestinian prisoners for the hostages, for the prisoners of war, and for the hostages. But
how many?
A third of them are soldiers, aren't they?
Sorry?
A third of the so-called hostages are actually soldiers and are prisoners of war.
Actually, there's about the numbers varies between 100 to 150 soldiers and officers. The rest who are dual citizen squatters. Okay, the resistance had been saying for the past week or so, we are willing to let go of these people, providing the conditions right to let them go, which is we need ceasefire for at least 5 days. So you could also release our women and children that's held by the Zionist jails.
Yeah.
So the Zionists are stalling, and they're refusing.
Yeah.
They're calling this is public relation by Hamas. Why it's public relation? They're trying to release the women and children who've been taken by not Hamas soldiers, but by regular citizens who went also with the Hamas fighters when they broke the ghetto walls. So they said, we are willing to let them go. Why don't you want to stop? We cannot release these people where you are bombing. How can I release? It's for the safety of your own prisoners.
Yeah, no,
but they're
Israel,
not.
Israel's demanding surrender from Hamas, and
There's not gonna-
they're expected to be believed, when they're saying that they're going to enter into a ceasefire after the hostages are released. I don't even believe them.
It's not gonna happen.
No.
Hamas, Al Jihad, PFLP, TFLP, Al Nasser brigades, and all other resisting groups, they're not gonna, hoist the white flag to the Zionists. They gotta die. They gotta live and fight or die. There will be no surrender, and the Zionists, I believe, will be defeated. That when the people are united, they will never be defeated.
The Zionists have definitely started to cannibalize, and they are definitely losing the argument, and so they have to resort to firepower. Now, during this pause, we don't know how long this pause will last. There have been hostages now released. Israel has had no choice but to do negotiations. But the real simple truth about this is that the state of Israel should cease to exist. If this new Hebrew culture wants to claim any nationality, then it should look to its strengths, and its strengths are largely music and theater and food. And that's kind of shallow in comparison to the Palestinian culture, which is definitely a nation. I would also, once again, just suggest people really should read the book by Dr. Weizfeld, The Federation of Palestinian and Hebrew Nations. But the land belongs to the Palestinians, not these new Hebrews who call themselves Israeli. The Jewish diaspora nation, the actual Jewish nation, is joining forces with the Palestinian indigenous nation against these new Hebrews. And any of these new Hebrews who are anti-Zionist are going to have to denounce their country. Their anti-Zionism will mean nothing unless they denounce their country. As far as the castes within the Zionist state go, the ones who would be the most incentivized for this will be the Mizrahim. But there's two types of Mizrahim within the Zionist state: ultra-Zionists and hardcore anti-Zionists, and nothing in between. But on the more Jewish side of things, which transcends Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, and Sephardi, the more Jewish the people within the Zionist state are, the more they are hostile to the Zionist state. And really, I am not as concerned about Israeli-born citizens who look to Judaism as much as I am concerned of Meir Sharim. Meir Sharim predates the state of Israel. The Jewish Palestinians are national, treasure to Palestine. I hope you can understand why this time around I played the rest of this Here and Now episode out of sequence. The first part of it was played in Anti-Crusade Part 1 of 4. Here in Anti-Crusade Part 2 of 4, I felt I had to put this out of a sequence because there's some points that need to be made stronger than others, and to do that I had to put this out of sequence. So you will have seen the whole video, but not necessarily in sequence. And if you want to see it, you just go to Dr. Abram Weizfeld's channel. He has the completely unedited version without the annoying commentary of Comrade Net there. And more people should be subscribing to his channel. There's playlists upon playlists upon playlists of direct action that he did in Palestine and in Quebec. So, people should watch.
That's true. That's true. I've been in touch with a couple of brothers from Natori Karta, and I understand what is true Judaism comparing to what is Nazism or Zionism.
Yeah.
Sorry, I use Nazism, but it's the same thing. So I always differentiate between Judaism, Jews versus Zionism or Zionist, who wants to use their fascist ideology as Jewish, which is totally in contradiction to it, for sure.
Yes. No. I made a sign, that I'm going to take to the demonstration at the Jewish Community Center tomorrow, saying, one Holocaust does not justify another.
Absolutely, you're absolutely
I'm
correct.
gonna, like put that right in their face.
Yes, yes, very true, very true. Have you heard the news from London today?
No.
There's 1 million protesters in the streets of London.
Wow.
Unreal. 1 million.
Wow.
Sunak and his interior minister tried to stop them. But the police said to them, no, we're not going to stop them. We're going to allow them.
Yeah.
You cannot do that. This is not Israel.
It's the same thing happened to me. At first the police arrested me, put me in prison for 4 days. And now there were last demonstration, last Sunday, there were 6 of them standing there protecting me.
No, you know what? I have to admit, beside the political echelon we have in the city, sadly, in the cities actually in Canada, across the provinces and the federal, the police basically, they're upholding the law, which is in the side of us. We Canadians, we have the right to express our views in demonstrations or rallies or by saying what we think it's right. Nobody can take that right from us.
Ottawa's going to Parliament Hill tomorrow for a big demonstration.
Yes. Tomorrow at 2:00 we have a rally and a march. From the Parliament Hill down to the market to the murderous U.S. embassy.
So you're focusing on the U.S. embassy. Yeah, that's where the control is. Yeah.
This
they're
is
letting Israel get away with all of this. Like
this is a war. This is what I call this is a NATO war or NATO war against the Palestinian people, by the hands of Zionists. So you have the squatters fighting the war of the United States.
This is becoming an international war. And then there's an international opposition, which is like, Intifada worldwide revolution is what was chanted at our demonstration here. Yeah.
People are fed up. People are absolutely fed up what's going on in Palestine.
Yeah.
Just so there's no confusion, as far as I know, Dr. Weizfeld does not endorse police. But what he did do is he found a contradiction within the state by the use of the civil society. Now, the police officers are not part of the civil society. They are part of the state. It doesn't matter what kind of police force it is. The police are based as an institution based on colonial garrisons. It needs to be completely abolished. The police exist exclusively to protect private property. Now, we probably see more civil, how should I say? We probably see more humanity from the police in Canada on the fact that it's not the United States. You see, the United States of America and the State of Israel both are exceptionally evil in comparison to the other British settler colonial countries. Canada, New Zealand, and Australia should be abolished just as much as the State of Israel and the United States of America, except in the sense that both the State of Israel and the United States of America are exceptionally draconian. But it is interesting to see Dr. Weizfeld do what he does best, and that's utilize the contradictions in the laws. Antifa worldwide. I totally support that. I'm totally down with that. But now it is time to finish this with Al Jazeera's second documentary on the Crusades. This came out on December 14th, 2016.
In the history of conflict between East and West, the mightiest battle between Christianity and Islam, a holy war in the name of religion. For the first time, the story of the Crusades from an Arab perspective. By the early 12th century, European crusades had successfully captured not only the holy city of Jerusalem, but huge swathes of the Muslim Levant.
مما يدل أن المعلن شيء والواقع تكوين مملكة صليبية ضخمة على حساب المسلمين في كل مكان يمكن أن يتواجد فيه الصليبيون.
The Muslim world, a mighty power for the last 4 centuries, was shocked by the Christian annexation of large parts of their empire.
عندما دخل عليهم قال لهم أنتم تستمتعون وتلهون وإخوانكم في الشام يتعرضون للقتل على يد الصليبيين.
But the Crusaders' initial success provoked a powerful response to the Western invasion.
المسلمون تخاذلوا في البداية وخافوا، فالوضع الآن يستلزم ضرورة الإفاقة، والإفاقة هذه لن تكون من القيادات ولكنها ستكون من الشعوب.
In the second episode of this series, the story of the Muslim revival in the face of the Crusades. July 1099. The armies of the First Crusade have captured the holy city of Jerusalem from the Muslims.
كان دخولا مرعبا. بدأوا بمجزرة يندى لها الجبين. قتلوا الناس في الشوارع، في المنازل، في الأزقة.
تذكر المصادر العربية أن نحو 100,000 شخص ذبحوا، بدليل أن المذبحة استمرت 10 أيام. ووجد نوع من السادية المريضة الجماعية بشكل غير مسبوق.
When the armies of the First Crusade finally break into Jerusalem in July 1099, they release the pent-up tensions of 3 years on the march and having finally achieved their spiritual goal. So really, it's a situation where the Crusaders wish to purify the city and take it back for themselves. And those defenders that survive are then driven out of the city.
Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem is Islam's third holiest site after the 2 holy mosques of Mecca and Medina. But now it was in the hands of the invading Crusaders.
عندما قام الصليبيون بمهاجمة المسجد الأقصى وتدنيسه، نجح مجموعة من هؤلاء الموجودين في داخله أن يحصلوا على مصحف سيدنا عثمان، وهذا المصحف كان مودعاً في داخل المسجد الأقصى، وفروا به هاربين إلى دمشق. هناك في دمشق كان يوجد العالم الكبير والفقيه الكبير زين الدين الهروي، وزين الدين الهروي يعتبر من أئمة المسلمين الكبار الذين لعبوا دورا كبيرا في تحريك الرأي العام في بلاد الشام حتى قبل أن يصل إليهم هؤلاء.
Al-Harawi interrupted his lessons and received the refugees carrying the holy book, the Quran. He left Damascus and headed towards Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, to see the Caliph, the universal leader of the Muslim world. The great scholar was not allowed to see the Caliph, so he decided to engineer the meeting in his own way. In Baghdad's great mosque, Al-Harawi deliberately broke the daytime fast during the holy month of Ramadan.
حافظ على حرمة الشهر الكريم يا لك من زنديق اتق الله يا شيخ قد جئناكم مستغيثين لإخوان لكم فقدوا الأرض وفقدوا العزيز فهل من مغيث لقد اعتدي على مقدساتكم الغوث يا أمة الإسلام الجهاد الجهاد يا أمة الجهاد.
The trick worked. Al-Harawi was arrested and brought before the young Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mustazhir.
عندما دخل عليهم قال لهم أنتم تستمتعون وتلهون وإخوانكم في الشام يتعرضون للقتل على يد الصليبيين.
The Abbasid Caliph was young and powerless, bearing only the title but carrying no authority. The real power was in the hands of the Seljuks, a Turkic dynasty that had taken control of Baghdad's caliphate half a century earlier.
لم يكن يفعل شيء، ممكن يصل شيء من التعاطف زي ما نحن الآن نتكلم حول بيت المقدس وما يتم فيه وكل ما يقوم بالعالم الإسلامي من جملتين محفوظين بيتقالوا عن بيت المقدس في المرحلة اللي احنا فيها.
On the other hand, the Crusaders were building a new system of rule in the lands that they had captured.
من أوائل مهام الإدارة الاستعمارية إن هم طردوا المسلمين والمسيحيين الشرقيين واليهود. والإدارة الجديدة فوجئت بأنه عدد الباقين من الصليبيين لا يملؤون شارعاً واحداً في القدس.
وحدثت موجة دعائية كبيرة في الغرب للقدوم إلى الشرق. القدوم ليس للحج والرجوع وإنما للاستقرار والعمل.
فبدأوا بقى في تكوين مستوطنات صليبية هناك في هذه الأراضي. هذه المستوطنات كثيرة جداً، أشهرها مستوطنة البيرة، بيت جبرين، الرملة.
كان سكان المستوطنات من جنوب فرنسا، كانوا من ألمانيا، كانوا من إيطاليا.
هؤلاء في أوروبا كانوا أقنانا وعبيدا وليس لهم حقوق بل عندهم الحقوق. عندما جاءوا إلينا تغير النظام تماماً. لماذا؟ لأنهم أصبحوا ملاكاً لهذه الأرض، ولذا تغير الوضع الاجتماعي تماماً والتركيبة السكانية والتركيبة الطبقية لهؤلاء.
Furthermore, the commanders of the First Crusade, lesser knights from Europe, now began to style themselves as monarchs in the lands they had conquered. Baldwin of Boulogne was crowned Baldwin I, King of Jerusalem.
وجود مملكة بيت المقدس مع وجود إمارتي الرها وأنطاكيا ابتدى نوع من التوسع السهل يجري في الأرض العربية. ومضت الإدارة الاستعمارية في توسيع نطاق المملكة بسهولة شديدة تشبه يعني سهولة قطع السكين للزبد.
حيثما توجد الأرض والمياه توجد الأطماع الصليبية. نهر العاصي، دجلة، الفرات، الأنهار اللبنانية، مما يدل أن المعلن شيء والواقع تكوين مملكة صليبية ضخمة على حساب المسلمين في كل مكان يمكن أن يتواجد فيه الصليبيون.
Within a decade, most of the Levantine coast was in the Crusaders' hands. And the Christian enclaves in the east now numbered 4, with the addition of a new county in Tripoli.
كان في شيء مهم جدا في الكيان الصليبي يعني ملحوظ على مدى سنوات عمر الوجود الصليبي، إنها كانت شريطا ساحليا، وإن هم أبدا لم يحدث إن هم يعني دخلوا في عمق الأراضي السورية أو اللبنانية أو الفلسطينية.
The coastal area was for the Crusaders a very, very tactically significant area, both to supply provisions and to bring pilgrims through the harbors. So securing the coastal areas was a crucial part of Crusaders' tactics.
وهنا يجب أن لا ننسى الدور الذي لعبته دويلات الإيطالية. الدولات الإيطالية اشترطت بوضوح: نحن نشترك بالحروب الصليبية ونساعد، شرط أن يكون لنا مكاسب. يعني بدنا كل مدينة نساعد على فتحها بدنا ثلثها. وما كان بيهمون المدن الداخلية، كان بيهمون المدن الساحلية كتجار.
البنادقة كانوا يقولون: نحن بنادقة أولاً وثانياً مسيحيين. ماذا يعني هذا الكلام؟ نحن نهتم بالاقتصاد في البداية وبعد ذلك الدين درجة ثانية.
The economics of the war soon began to dominate the Crusades. And the regent of Antioch, Tancred, marched his army towards Aleppo, the trade capital of the Levant.
حلب العاصمة الثانية لبلاد الشام. حلب مجاورة جغرافية لأنطاكية، فوجود إمارة صليبية على حدود حلب يعني أن هذه الإمارة لن تسكت عن مهاجمة حلب وعن ضم حلب. الظروف مهيئة في حلب لأن تهاجمها هذه القوات الصليبية. حاكم حلب رضوان متخاذل وخانع، ولذا يقوم بممالأة الجيوش الصليبية.
كان هناك ود بينه وبين الصليبيين لدرجة أن هو وضع الصليب على مسجد حلب.
هذا كله أثار الرأي العام الموجود في حلب، قضاة حلب، علمائها، فقهائها، وتزعم هذه المعارضة أبو الفضل ابن الخشاب.
ماذا حدث؟ وبكم؟
Aleppo revolted against its treacherous ruler Radwan. And Ibn al-Khashab led the angry masses to remove the cross from the top of the city's mosque. But he was aiming for more.
التحرك الآن سيكون بنفس الطريقة التي تحرك بها الشيخ زين الدين الهروي من قبل، هي الاتجاه ناحية بغداد عاصمة الخلافة.
أيها المسلمون، يا أيها المسلمون، يا من تعظمون شعائر الله، ما فائدة صلاتكم والإفرنج في القدس يدنسونها بأرجلهم
أين حميتكم الدينية؟ وهم هناك يغزون الأرض ويستبيحون العرض. أين أمير المؤمنين وإخوانكم في الشام يقتلون ونساؤهم وأطفالهم يسبون؟ ألم يبعث إليه؟
فلذا اشتعل الرأي العام من قلب المسجد
في صد عدوان الإفرنج. والله إن ملك الروم أكثر
ليكون مسجد بغداد في كل مرة من المرات هو المنارة التي تتحرك منها الدعوة للجهاد ضد الصليبيين.
أحل الكفر بالإسلام ضيما يطول عليه للدين النحيب فحق ضائع.
This time, the uprising was irresistible, and the Muslim public forced the caliphate, weak though it was, to take action.
كم من مسجد جعلوه ديرا على محرابه نصب الصليب.
The embarrassed Abbasid Caliph al-Mustazhir demanded help from his protector, the Seljuk Sultan.
هذا الأمر كان له رد فعل إيجابي، وهو الاتصال بالسلطان محمد السلجوقي. السلطان محمد السلجوقي نفس الموقف يضطر أن يصدر الأوامر لأتابك الموصل مودود بضرورة تجميع الجيش لمواجهة الصليبيين ورفع الحصار المفروض على حلب.
حين توجه مودود لفك الحصار الصليبي عن حلب نجح إلى حد ما، لأنه الصليبيين لم يستطيعوا أن يستمروا في فرض هذا الحصار، وفي نفس الوقت ما كانش في قوات جاية لهم من بقية يعني الكيانات الصليبية اللي موجودة إلى الجنوب، خصوصا من مملكة بيت المقدس.
ولكن الغريب إن رضوان قبض على كل أهل الرأي الموجودين في داخل حلب، ومنهم الشيخ أبو الفضل الخشاب وكل من هو معه من محركي حركة الدعوة للجهاد. وأصبح الأمر الآن هو منع هذا الجيش وعدم فتح أبواب حلب لهذا الجيش.
Mawdud's army was prevented from entering Aleppo. But another opportunity to take on the Crusaders now arose. With a call for help from Tochtkin, the governor of Damascus.
طغطقين في الوقت ده كان معرض لهجوم من قبل مملكة بيت المقدس الصليبية، فقدمت قوات مودود ليقدم مساعداته لطغطقين.
والتقى شرف الدين مودود بالملك بولدوين في معركة بالقرب من طبرية عرفت باسم معركة السنبرة، وهنا انتصر المسلمون على الصليبيين في هذه المعركة.
ويليام السوري المؤرخ الصليبي المعروف اعتبر أن السماء تخلت عنهم أي عن الصليبيين عندما هزموا في هذه المعركة، لأنهم كانوا يعتقدون أن السماء تقف إلى جانبهم وبالتالي لن يهزمهم أحد.
Tochtkin, the governor of Damascus, received Mawdud gratefully after his victory at As-Sanabra. But his gratitude masked jealousy and suspicion.
مشكلة مودود أنه كان صادقا في عصر كثر فيه الكذابون الذين أرادوا البقاء على مصالحهم وكراسي الحكم.
Mawdud left his camp for Friday prayers with Tochtkin. But an assassin belonging to a Shia secret order known as al-Batiniyya was waiting for him.
هناك من يشير أن ظهير الدين طغطقين اللي هو أتابك دمشق خشي من شرف الدين مودود، فأرسل له أحد الباطنية ليقوم باغتياله، وتمكن من اغتياله وهو صائم.
At the close of the 11th century, the Shia Batiniyya began a campaign of killings against Sunni Seljuk figures. This secret order was known in Arabic as al-Hashashun. This Arabic name lives on to this day in the word for a political killing: assassination.
الذي قتل مودود هو خيانة. هذه الخيانة كانت من قبل هذا الرجل الباطني، وربما الباطنية هؤلاء وجودهم في هذه المرحلة كان خطراً كبيراً جداً جداً على العالم الإسلامي، يوازي خطر الصليبي، لأن المسلمين كانوا يوجهون بصدورهم ناحية الصليبيين وتضرب ظهورهم من قبل الباطنية.
بصفة عامة فشلت حركة مودود، لكنها أدت إلى نتائج في غاية الأهمية. أولاً، اتضح لنا أن البيت الإسلامي يحتاج إلى ترتيب من الداخل، وأن الأعداء ليسوا صليبيين فقط.
ده عمل إيه؟ ده أكد للناس أنه نمط الخليفة الذي لا يملك من أمره شيئاً لم يعد يصلح للدفاع عن المسلمين، ولهذا ابتدينا نلاقي نمط جديد وهو الملك المحارب أو الأمير المحارب. أول نمط له هو مودود.
The Muslims had lost a hero, but there was another on the rise. In the years to come, the wind would change direction, and the Muslim revival would start to gain momentum. Ahmed ad-Din Zingi would lead the Muslims to achieve their first major victory against the Crusades. The year 1127. Ahmed ad-Din Zingi becomes governor of Mosul in northern Iraq. Its former governor, Mawdud, had stood up to the Crusaders during their otherwise unstoppable expansion in the east. But Mawdud had been assassinated in 1113.
عماد الدين زنكي كان ربيب بيت مودود، وشارك مودود في كل الحملات التي خرج بها. قام بدور جهادي كبير واستكمل دور الحقيقة كبير كان قد بدأه مودود.
كان رجلاً صارماً وقائداً عسكرياً لا يعرف التهاون، وفي نفس الوقت حدد لنفسه هدف، وهو هدف القضاء على هؤلاء الصليبيين.
كان من أنصار فكرة لابد أن أقوم بعمل ما ضد الصليبيين فيلتف العالم الإسلامي حولي ولا أنتظر الوحدة، أنا أكون نواة لها.
ولهذا تطلع إلى أنه يبني قوة في الموصل، إنما أدرك أن قوة الموصل هذه لا يمكن أن تكون كافية، وأنه لابد من بناء محور الموصل حلب.
A year after taking up the post as governor in Mosul, Ahmed ad-Din Zingi marched his army towards Aleppo and brought it under his control.
هذا الوصل بالمعنى الجيوسياسي بين الموصل وبين حلب ماذا يتأتى عنه؟ يتأتى عنه الإمساك في بوابة أساسية باتجاه الداخل الشامي وبوابة عبور باتجاه بلاد الرافدين.
وبكده بقطع الطريق بين إمارتي أنطاكيا والروحة، وإني بقطع الطريق بين هذه الإمارات الصليبية الشمالية وبين إمارة طرابلس ومملكة بيت المقدس، وإني هوقف عملية تجارية بين الطرفين، كأني هكون عقبة كؤود أمام الصليبيين في مواجهة العالم الإسلامي.
لأن الصليبيين كانوا يعتمدون على تفتيت الكيانات والتعامل مع كل منطقة بمفردها بفضل ضيق أفق بعض الحكام، وبالتالي وجدنا اتجاها توحيديا، ومن يسعى إلى ضم حلب بالضرورة يتجه جنوبا إلى دمشق، وحاول أن يضم دمشق دون جدوى نظرا لطبيعة دمشق الخاصة، إذ أن حكامها سعوا إلى تجديد هدى مع مملكة بيت المقدس الصليبية لتقسيم المياه وضمان تدفق التجارة.
Allied in this way to the Crusaders, Damascus did not join the Muslim unification project. Its ruler, Mu'in ad-Din, even sent the renowned Muslim historian Usama ibn Munqidh as an ambassador to the Kingdom of Jerusalem.
Usama ibn Munqidh is one of the great writers of 12th century Syria. In the course of his long and complicated existence, one part of which he was a diplomat, and he spent quite a lot of time talking with the Franks in Jerusalem, and he visited the city on several occasions.
حياة الصليبيين في داخل بلاد الشام في هذه المرحلة لا نعرفها إلا من كتاب الاعتبار. هذا الكتاب أسامة بن منقذ يحكي فيه رؤية العين ما رآه عند الصليبيين.
أسامة أخذ عليهم مسائل متصلة بوضع المرأة. المرأة أنه كيف تستقبل رجلاً في بيتها في غياب زوجها. هذا أمر يتنافى مع الأخلاق العربية الإسلامية.
عن الطب بقى عندهم هو بيدينا فصل بيبين إنه هم كانوا ناس متخلفين تماماً. يعني في إحدى الحالات كان في حد بيعاني من صداع شديد جدا، يعني صليبي من الفرنج يعني زي ما هو بيسميه، فهو يعني قال إنه علاجه بالفصد وإخراج الدم الفاسد منه بالفصد وهو يخف. فجي أحد القساوسة وقال لا ده في شيطان راكبه، وإنه لابد من إخراج الشيطان، وفتحوا فروة راسه على هيئة صليب وحشوها بالملح عشان الشيطان يخرج. خرج وخرجت روح الراجل معاه.
And Usama tells us that the Westerners who come over from Europe are much more zealous and much more aggressive than those who live with the Muslims in the Near East. He views the Westerners as great warriors. They're very bold, they're very strong, but a bit like beasts, capable of bearing a heavy burden, perhaps not so much more sophisticated.
Sans doute faut-il croire qu'il avait raison, parce que, si vous voulez, les sources grecques, les sources de Constantinople disent exactement la même chose. Qu'il y a à cette époque, sans nul doute, en effet, un écart de civilisation entre l'Orient, de manière générale, que ce soit l'Orient musulman ou l'Orient grec, byzantin, et l'Occident.
With Damascus still protected by its truce with the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Ahmed ad-Din Zengi now began to prepare for what would be his greatest military achievement.
عماد الدين زنكي بدأ يخطط لضرب إمارة الروحة. لماذا إمارة الروحة؟ لأنها معزولة إلى الشمال. فمعزولة إلى الشمال يبقى نجدتها إلى حد ما بعيدة. وخطط ليوم 25 ديسمبر ليلاً، يعني صباح الكريسماس. فهنا نجح تماما في أنه استولى على مدينة الروحة، يعني في كده في بضع ساعات.
وهي أول إمارة يقيمها الصليبيون في المنطقة، وأول مدينة يستردها المسلمون بقيادة زنكي.
And with hindsight, this is seen as a breakthrough, as the real start, the revival of the jihad in the Muslim Near East. It's the first big defeat for the Crusaders, and it shows that they can actually be defeated and that the Muslim revival can begin to gather some pace.
انتقل المسلمون من رد الفعل إلى الفعل، وأصبح الفرنج الصليبيون هم في ردة الفعل.
وبالتالي سنة 1144 ميلادية تساوي 539 هجرية تعتبر عاما فارقا في تاريخ حركة الجهاد الإسلامي، وعماد الدين زنكي تحول إلى بطل شعبي كبير لأنه حقق حلما طالما راود المسلمين.
هذا نلمسه من المؤلفات الإسلامية. المؤلفات الإسلامية جمعت لنا الأقوال والألقاب التي أخذها من أفواه الناس عماد الدين زنكي. نصرة الدين، المجاهد الكبير، اعتبروا أن هذا الرجل هو المفتاح الذي سيفتح مستقبلاً باب المسجد الأقصى.
Ahmad ad-Din's victory in Edessa lifted the Muslims' morale and enthusiasm for the fight. But 2 years later, Ahmad ad-Din Zengi was killed by his slave. His death could have put an end to his mission. But he was followed by his son, Nur ad-Din, a son who would excel his father.
برزت الحاجة مرة أخرى إلى نموذج الملك المحارب واستعادته ليقود الجهاد ضد الصليبيين. نور الدين محمود كان يعني تجسيداً لهذا النظام، زي أبوه وزي مودود من قبله.
الوالد كانت الظروف والأمور تستدعي أن يكون صلباً شديداً، وإن قالوا دموياً فهي ضرورة، لأن المواقف كانت تحتاج للحسم. فلذا سنستبدل الطبائع التي كانت عند عماد الدين زنكي بطبائع أخرى مخالفة، لأنه يريد جذب الشعوب، يريد جذب الناس.
عماد الدين كان مقاتلاً جسورا، وفي سلوكه الديني لم يكن ملتزما التزاما فعليا على الأقل، بينما كان نور الدين مفعما بالإيمان.
نور الدين محمود لم يكف يوما عن التفكير في التحرير، وكل حكمه واستراتيجيته كانت مبنية على هذا، وإنه لولا جهود نور الدين محمود ما كان ممكنا أن نصل إلى المرحلة المتمثلة في تحرير بيت المقدس وتحرير عدد كبير من المدن والحصون والقلاع من أيدي الصليبيين.
When Zengi captured Edessa in 1144, this was the first time that Muslims were unified against the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem. And this was the first time that one of the Crusader states, the county of Edessa, was captured since the First Crusade. This caused a devastating reaction in Europe, both among the people and among the religious leaders.
الفكرة أن البابوية تعتبر نفسها المحرك للدعوة للحملات الصليبية. البابا أوربان عندما كان في الحملة الأولى، نجد البابا يوجين الآن في الحملة الصليبية الثانية بيعقد مجمع ديني هو الآخر، وهذا المجمع دعا إليه أقطاب أوروبا.
وبدأ الزعماء الدينيين في أوروبا يدعون لحملة صليبية جديدة، وزادوا في جرعة الغفران المرتبطة بالحملة الصليبية.
Pope Eugene's preaching was highly effective. The Second Crusade would be led by two European kings, Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany. in the summer of 1147, the armies set off towards the Holy Land. After almost a year, the German and French forces finally arrived in Jerusalem. But instead of trying to recapture Edessa from the Zingids, they launched another attack, which would end in disaster.
The armies of the Second Crusade that reached the Holy Land joined with the forces of the Kingdom of Jerusalem and besieged Damascus, great city of the Muslim Near East, in the summer of 1148.
Pourquoi cette erreur? Pourquoi aller vers Damas alors que les habitants de Damas étaient plutôt alliés avec le royaume de Jérusalem contre les Turcs?
Damascus is an interesting choice. They're very keen that the new ruler of northern Syria, Nur-ad-Din, the son of Zengi, does not get control of Damascus. So they attack Damascus.
أما هاجموا مدينة دمشق، الصليبيين المحليين غضبة. ليه؟ احنا حلفاء معاهم وانتوا هتمشوا وتتركونا في مشكلة مع هؤلاء.
الاثنين تبادلوا الشكوك حوالين العمالة للمسلمين، والصليبيين اللي جايين من أوروبا ابتدوا يقولوا إنه الصليبيين المحليين عملاء للمسلمين.
جيش غير متجانس، الغرض غير واضح، هدف غير محدد، ولذا فشل هذا الجيش فشلاً ذريعاً.
These armies have come out from Western Europe. They've been led by kings. Their expectations are very high. And they were retreated. There wasn't a great battle. They weren't defeated in some epic struggle. They just slink away. And that's a real blow to the morale of the Crusaders in the West.
The tragic failure of the Second Crusade was by no means the last disaster to befall the Christians. 6 years later, Nur-ad-Din finally managed to annex Damascus, the very city they had failed to capture.
فإذا بدمشق ترتمي في أحضان وبين ذراعي نور الدين محمود المفتوحتين بناء على دعوة من أهل دمشق. يعني أهل دمشق نفسها الناس هم اللي وجهوا الدعوة لنور الدين محمود إنه يجي وياخد بلدهم.
So, for the first time, the Franks have got somebody with Aleppo, Damascus, under the same ruler. And that's the first time that had taken place since their arrival in the Near East.
فأصبحت هذه المنطقة الهلال الإسلامي في مواجهة القوى الصليبية في أنطاكيا وطرابلس وبيت المقدس.
كله في إطار ما يعرف بوحدة المسلمين أمام هدف واحد وهو استرداد الأرض.
نور الدين محمود كان قد كرس حياته لمبدأ الجهاد، ووضع هدفاً رمز له بأن أمر نجاراً من حلب بأن يصنع منبراً ليضعه في المسجد الأقصى يوم التحرير.
لأن بيت المقدس نفسه لما دخل الصليبيين في عام 1099 كسروا المنبر إلى قطع شظيات خشبية، وكل صليبي أخذ قطعة منها ذكرى إلى بلاده، فلم يعد في داخل بيت المقدس داخل المسجد الأقصى منبر.
هو رجل صاحب مشروع يعد الأمة للجهاد، عمل على استخدام العلماء وأحدث نهضة علمية في حلب وفي دمشق.
إذا سمع أن هناك عالما فقيها في مصر يأتي به إلى بلاد الشام ليدرس في بلاد الشام. إذا عالما فقيها موجودا في بغداد يأتي يستدعيه ويأتي به ويعطي له الأجر الجزيل.
كان من ضمن المناهج التي تدرس الحث على الجهاد والحث على الوحدة. من أجل ماذا؟ من أجل استرداد الأرض، استرداد بيت المقدس. هنا بدأت في صحوة بنسميها الصحوة الإسلامية. هذه الصحوة الإسلامية حقيقة بدأت قبل كده، لكن الآن أصبحت صحوة بفكر، ليست صحوة عشوائية.
In Jerusalem in the winter of 1163, a new king succeeded to the throne, Amalric I.
حاليا مملكة بيت المقدس تولى الملك فيها الملك عموري. الملك عموري كان شخصية لها فكرها ولها قوتها، فلذا أصبحت مملكة بيت المقدس الآن يتربع على عرشها قوة كبيرة جدا. هذه القوة يعني عمل حساب لها نور الدين محمود.
هنا كان لابد من إنه أنظار الفريقين المتصارعين تتجه إلى الجبهة التي يمكن أن تحسم الموقف، وهي مصر. مصر في ذلك الحين أشبه بالرجل المريض الراقد على ضفاف النيل والكل ينتظر ميراثه.
There's a competition, basically, between the Crusaders and Nur ad-Din to take control of Egypt. Egypt's Shia, it's ruled by the Fatimid dynasty, and it's in a state of decline. Egypt is also immensely rich, and there's effectively a competition as to who can get hold of this rich, ailing power. The fertility of the Nile, the trade routes that come through it. If you can control Egypt, you will have the wealth and the resources to defeat your opponent.
ومصر يعني كانت جائزة كبرى لمن يفوز بها، وأحوالها السياسية كانت متردية جدا نتيجة لتعاقب الوزراء أصحاب السلطة الفعلية على كرسي الوزارة. ووصلنا إلى مرحلة كان في صراع بين اتنين على كرسي الوزارة، واحد اسمه شاور وواحد اسمه ضرغام. أحدهم سعى إلى بلاط نور الدين محمود يعرض عليه مكافآت كثيرة، منها خراج مصر ومنها تكلفة الجيوش اللي هتيجي و إلى آخره لنصرته على أعدائه وهو شاور. والثاني سعى إلى بلاط عموري أو أماليريكوس ملك بيت المقدس يطلب منه العون.
فأي من القوتين سيتنجح في الوصول إلى مصر ستكون لها الريادة وستكون لها السيادة.
كان هدف نور الدين المسارعة إلى مصر استكمالاً للجبهة الإسلامية بهدف التضييق على الصليبيين بحيث يصبحوا محاصرين بين الشام ومصر.
مصر منطق تاريخي رائع. كل من دخل دائرة الجهاد الإسلامي كان من خلال هذا الرحم الجغرافي التاريخي الشمصر. نور الدين محمود مدرك هذه الرابطة.
فحصل كما نسميه في التاريخ سباق نوري عموري على مصر.
Nur ad-Din sent his forces towards Egypt under the command of one of his men, a Kurdish general called Shirkuh. He took with him a reluctant young man who would write his name through the history of the Crusades, Salah ad-Din, known in the West as Saladin.
في غمرة هذا الصراع برز يوسف المشهور باسم صلاح الدين الأيوبي، شاباً فوق 20 بقليل، وصاحب عمه أسد الدين شركوه في أول جيش يرسله نور الدين محمود إلى مصر.
The fight would last another 5 years before Shirkuh would succeed in expelling the Crusaders from the Nile Valley.
وانحسم الصراع والسباق الزمني بين نور الدين محمود والملك الصليبي عموري، وانتهى الأمر بسيطرة أسد الدين شيراكو في الوزارة للعاضد الفاطمي، آخر الخلفاء الفاطميين، ثم بعد هذا تولى الأمر صلاح الدين الأيوبي.
On succeeding his uncle as vizier, Salah ad-Din had reached a turning point in his life. He was about to embark on a path that would change the history of the Crusades.